Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Camille had already been living in the orphanage for more than 6 months. The 13-year-old girl kept herself apart all this time. She did not want to come into contact with her peers and classmates. For this, she was nicknamed Bun. Camille was not at all offended by this offensive nickname, as she realized that it was her own fault that now she is called such a girl. When she got to the orphanage, she kept thinking, was it right that she volunteered to live in this institution? After all, Camille told the class teacher about her life, and the teacher sounded the alarm. And all was that Camille had divided her life into 2 parts. Until the age of 11, the girl grew up a happy child. She was cherished by her mom, and dad tried his best they could to buy fashionable things. In general, the parents wanted their daughter to not need anything. And then something happened, and everything went wrong. Initially, the parents between themselves began to fight often, after which the girl's mother often cried. Then he stopped coming home. The father slept over. Camille realized that there was an unhealthy atmosphere in the house, and it would not end well. However, Camille couldn't understand why her parents were fighting, and so she asked her mother, "Why do you and her father fight so often? Do you really want to know?" "I do. I want us to live like we used to, happily and as a family. And I don't want you to cry." "Then go and ask your father why we fight with him." The girl nodded to her mother in response, and when her father came, she turned to him with the same question. The father looked at his daughter carefully, and then called her back to the children's room and put her on a chair, and sat opposite him. The man nervously ran his palm through his hair and then said, "Daughter, you are not so small, and some things should understand. Anyway, I've fallen out of love with your mother, and I want to divorce her. I wanted to talk to you about it earlier, but I didn't dare. Divorcing my mom won't affect our relationship. I just won't live here, but I'll visit you." "Dad, is there another woman in your life?" "That's a serious question. I'll be honest with you. You're right. I have a woman I love and want to live with. You've made your point. I don't want to talk to you anymore," roughly said the girl and rushed to the bathroom, where she gave vent to tears. Now Camille understood her mother, who had been crying a lot lately. After this conversation with her father, a few days passed, and the man soon packed his things and left their family. Camille became withdrawn after Papa's departure. She was incredibly hurt that her father had betrayed her and her mom for another woman. And the girl's mother, after she was abandoned by her husband, just sobbed and cursed her fate. At first, Camille's father visited her, coming once a week to school after lessons. However, Camille did not talk to him and tried to get away from her father as soon as possible. This continued for a month, and the man began to come to school less and less often. Meanwhile, the girl's mother, in order to somehow survive the betrayal, began to impose on strong drinks. Even not perfectly understood that the mother degenerates every day. And when once again the father appeared at school, the girl told him everything and asked him to talk to her mother. The man looked sadly at his daughter and said that he would not do this. And then he added, "Your mom is a grown woman and should understand what she is doing. And I also want to say that now I will rarely visit you. You don't spoil me much with your visits anyway. There's a reason for that. I have a woman I live with who's expecting a baby in the near future, and now I'm gonna have a lot on my mind. You must realize that a baby needs a lot of attention." "That's a great thing to say. You're telling your own daughter. So I don't want to be taken care of. Get out then, and you cannot appear in my life at all." Barely holding back her sobs, the girl said, "I understand that you are offended at the moment. Be patient a little. As soon as the baby is born and grows up, I will visit you more often. You should be happy because you'll have a sister I'll introduce you to. I've told you everything. Go away. And don't show up with anyone. I don't want to meet anyone. I hate you and despise you," the girl said quickly and hurried home. Camille couldn't wait to cry. but she didn't want to do it in front of her father. As soon as Camille got home, she rushed to her room and burst into tears. She wanted her mother to be there to tell her about her conversation with her father. However, when her mother came home drunk, the girl lost all desire to tell her mother anything. A few days passed. Camille came home and was very surprised to find the front door unlocked. Camille remembered exactly that she had closed the door. The girl entered the room and saw that her mother was sitting in the kitchen with tea and a cat on the table. Camille involuntarily wrinkled her nose and said to Mama, "Are you drinking again? For some reason, it wasn't at work that I got fired." Can you imagine, my daughter? Such a valuable employee was kicked out of the company. What are we going to do now? I'll look for a new job. Don't worry, everything will be fine. It's all your father's fault. He left us to our fate. Camille hoped her mother would go to look for a new job the next day, but she didn't. The girl's mother drank heavily for almost a week while she had money. When the finances ran out, she started selling gold jewelry first, and then she started selling things. This went on for some time. Camille tried her best to convince her mother to stop drinking, but she, being drunk, drove away her daughter. Camille realized that soon they would not be able to buy bread. The girl did not know what to do. Camille began to feel hungry all the time, as her mother rarely cooked at home, and lately her mother began to leave in the evening and come back in the morning and again drunk. That's when Camille decided to talk to Emily's class teacher. She told the teacher about her life. The teacher listened attentively to the school drill and then said to the girl, "You can't live like this. I will try to talk to your mom, but I am afraid it will be a waste of time. The only thing I can offer you is to live in an orphanage, where you will be properly taken care of. Maybe the termination of parental rights will make your mom reconsider her views on life, and she will give up her addiction. And don't get me wrong that after your story I will have to contact the guardianship authorities anyway, because I have to respond to the fact that my student does not finish her meals and often stays home alone at night." The very next day, Emily tried to talk to Camille's mother, but the conversation did not work, as the landlady was in an inadequate state. The teacher made another attempt 2 days later, but the situation was repeated. And then the teacher detained the girl after lessons and told her it was useless to talk to your mom. "I ask you not to take offense at me, but I'm appealing to the guardianship authorities. I just don't have a way out. I'm not offended. I've been thinking about your words for a long time, and it seems to me that I would be much better off in an orphanage now. You see, I'm just afraid that I'll go down a crooked path and start stealing from stores so that I won't feel hungry." Good for you for thinking that way. Don't despair. Maybe when you get to the orphanage, your mom will realize that she might lose her own daughter. And soon Camille showed up at the orphanage. Now she was sitting there thinking about her mother and whether it was right for her to want to live in this institution. Camille was distracted from her thoughts by a woman's voice that said, "Sitting alone again as your peers rampage outside." The girl turned around and looked at the woman with a smile. It was Evelyn, the cleaning lady. Camille had become friends with her. A month after coming here, all the children at the orphanage thought Evelyn was a woman. Camille had a different opinion of the janitor. She liked it when the janitor affectionately called her by her first name and asked her how her day was going. Evelyn walked over to the girl and sat down next to her. The older woman already knew Camille's story. For what reasons the child had ended up in the orphanage, the cleaning lady herself did not understand what made her feel special toward this withdrawn girl. And now, seeing the pensive Camille, she quietly turned to her. What she was dreaming about at the moment, honestly, about my mom in my life. Tell me, if it's not a secret. I've been waiting a long time for my mom to come and take me away from here. But she never even visited me once. And now I was wondering if I was right to want to live in an orphanage. And now I realize that I was right. I don't need the pits at all. And I have an aversion to her. I feel like pretty soon I'm just gonna hate her. You can't say that about your own mother. You know, I grew up in an orphanage too. My mom gave me up when I was a baby. And at first, I had the same thoughts as you. But as I'd grown up, I've changed my mind drastically. Tell me why. Interested? Camille asked. I'll try to explain it to you with my own example. As soon as I left the orphanage, I entered medical school. When I graduated, I met a young man named Roman. This guy started courting me, and soon we both realized that we loved each other. Soon we had a wedding with him. And then we had our firstborn son, who was named Constantine. And now I come to the most important part. Why did I stop hating my mother? It's because with my husband I lived in peace and harmony. We had a wonderful son. You see, I've been a happy woman all these years. And now you just imagine that if my mother had not given birth to me, I would not have experienced any of this, because I would not be in this world. And that's why I am grateful to my mother for giving me life. And my mother left me in the hospital, but I do not blame her, because it is quite possible that she had good reasons for it. But you know my story, don't you? My mom's only good reason was to drink hard liquor. Your mom slipped up. She's a weak person. Not everyone can be a strong person. Don't just hate her. Believe that you'll grow up. You'll have a happy life. And you will thank your mom more than once for living in this world. Smiling, said the old woman. I don't know. Maybe you are right about that. And tell me, why do you work as a cleaner if you have a nursing education? That's a separate story. At one time I worked as a nurse in a children's clinic. When the years passed, I retired, but continued to work. But soon the management told me that it was necessary to give way to young staff. I had to quit. I did not regret it, as I had a loving husband with me. And my son at that time got married and left for another city. And after I was retired and sitting at home, my husband passed away a year later. And why did you go back to work after that? I don't understand. Sitting alone in four walls is not a particularly pleasant occupation. You're so young, you wouldn't realize it. I just started to feel lonely. And then my son took out a mortgage to buy an apartment. He needed help with the money. So I decided that I'd rather work than just stay at home beating around the bush. And now I've been working here for 4 years, and I've never regretted it. Why don't the children from the orphanage treat you well? I think that this is a question you should ask your peers, not me, Evelyn said with a smile. And then she added, and to find out the answers of boys and girls, you need to talk to them, not stay away from them. Years of life went by. Everything was also kept aloof from peers. Both the boys and the orphanage staff were used to it by now, except that Evelyn was dissatisfied with the fact that Camille was not a sociable child and often talked to the girl about it. And the girl, in turn, in response, only kept silent. Time flew by. And now Camille has already turned 18 years old. It was time for the girl to start living on her own. And the day before Camille had to leave the orphanage, she was approached by a cleaning lady who said, "You're starting a new epoch in your life. You must be careful, because living on your own, you can make a lot of mistakes. I know that the state gave you a one-room apartment somewhere in the periphery, but that's okay. The main thing is that you have your own corner. The only place you've been allocated is there. There's no furniture. I already thought of that. I'll buy you a kitchen table with 4 stools. It'll be a housewarming gift. A bed and a dresser. I'll give them from my son's room. He doesn't need this furniture, but it'll be good for you. I'll give you some of the kitchen utensils. Of course, you've got to give me something to eat. When I decide to visit you, if you don't mind, I'll always be glad to have you here. You've been so supportive while I've been here. I'll be eternally grateful. Oh, don't give me that big talk. And what kind of gratitude is there to be thankful for? Why don't you tell me what you're gonna do? How are you gonna get out of here? I want to be an announcer, and I'm gonna try to get into college. And of course, I'll look for part-time work in the evenings to make a living. And if you don't get in, believe me, it happens a lot. I'll get a job, and in a year I'll try again. And soon Camille moved into a studio apartment. She quickly got settled in and immediately got to know her neighbor. It was a middle-aged woman whose name was Wendy. Soon Camille tried to enter the institute, But disappointment awaited her. The girl missed a few points. After she found out that she was unlucky with the enrollment, she came home in a bad mood. She wanted to cry with grief. Camille only sat down on the bed as she received a call on her cell phone from Evelyn, who asked how things were going. The girl tried not to cry and mouthed, "I didn't get in. And I had so much faith in my abilities." "That says what? That you shouldn't be overconfident. Just write that you're going to make your beautiful face raw and put it aside for the moment. Otherwise, I'll scold you like a little girl who went to the wrong potty," the old woman said sternly. "Do you know how to cheer up?" Laughing, the girl said, "That's great. What are your plans now?" "Well, I'm going to look for a job. I need finances to live on." A few days later, the girl got a job in a flower pavilion. The manager at first worked together with Camille, helping her to learn the art of how to beautifully design a bouquet. And after a couple of weeks, the director of the pavilion, Jenna, approved the girl's actions and said that now she could work independently. Camille was happy because she was praised by the director. And so the first day came when Camille went out to work at the pavilion. One girl was very worried, but the first shift went out without any misunderstandings. And on the second day, Camille went to work without worrying that she would not be able to fulfill her duties. The first month flew by as Camille worked in the flower pavilion. The girl enjoyed going to work. One day, a young man came to see her and immediately complimented Camille on her good looks. Camille often heard such words from representatives of the stronger sex and calmly treated them. But this young man said the compliment in a special way, and the girl looked at him with interest. Meanwhile, the guy said, "Can I buy a bouquet of flowers that will reflect your beauty?" Camille, hearing this, laughed and handed the visitor a bouquet of decorative daisies. The young man, seeing the flowers, also laughed and said, "You obviously underestimate yourself. And to be honest, I need the bouquet to give to my friend's girlfriend. It's her birthday today." Camille looked around at the ready bouquets and then chose gladioli. She handed the flowers to the young man and said that such a bouquet should be to the girl's taste. The guy took the mustache and paid and then asked permission to see Camille off in the evening. Camille was not ready for this and therefore refused. Soon the visitor left. The girl had worked her shift and was getting ready to close the pavilion when she saw again the guy who had complimented her today. She looked questioningly at the young man and asked him if he needed another bouquet. "No flowers today. I just want to see you off. But I already refused your request." "All right. Then sell me a bouquet of white roses." Camille complied with the visitor's request, and he took the flowers and put them on the counter, saying that the roses were bought for her. And after that, the guy left the pavilion. The girl was surprised by the stranger's behavior, and at that moment thought that the young man was strange. After this incident, a couple of days passed, and Camille already closed the pavilion and was going to go home. Suddenly, she was called by a lover of daisies. "Would you give me a couple of minutes?" Camille looked at the stranger and recognized him as the man who had recently given her roses. The young man stood near the foreign car and elbowed her. The girl asked what the guy wanted, and the one after her words came up to her and answered that he could not wait to get acquainted with the beauty. Camille did not know how to act in this situation and therefore said, "Let's not do this. And I disgust you." The young man said in surprise, "I didn't say that. I'm just not used to it. Getting acquainted like that. You're putting a price on yourself," sarcastically said the stranger. And then he added, "How long do you have to be groomed to tell me your name?" "All right, you're on. My name is Camille. Now we're talking. And my name is Stephen. Let's get you a ride in the car." "If you want a ride, I'm not getting in the car on foot." Stephen nodded and followed the girl. The young man told different anecdotes about Camille laughed. The girl noted to herself that the new acquaintance was an excellent conversationalist and easy to communicate with, and soon the couple approached Camille's house. Camille thanked the guy for seeing her off, but Stephen stopped her and asked for permission to take a leisurely walk with her again tomorrow. The girl, after some thought, agreed. When she got home, Camille involuntarily thought about the man. It suddenly seemed to her that perhaps this man was her soulmate. And then she pushed these thoughts away from her, realizing that she did not know Stephen at all to allow such thoughts. All the following week, the young man met the girl from work almost every day. From him, she learned that he was 24 years old and studying at the institute. The guy also said that he lived on his own in a 2-room apartment. Stephen said that his father is engaged in business and his mother is a housewife. When Camille heard all this, she said with a smile, "You're just like a major." "That's right. I think I am, too, and it doesn't offend me. Why did I tell you all about me? You haven't told me anything about your own person. I'm also interested to know who your parents are, why you work in a flower pavilion and not study." Camille looked at the guy and said that she was a pupil of an orphanage. She did not tell him the reason why she had gotten there. She was uncomfortable to admit that her mom consumed strong drinks. Stephen, when he heard that Camille was from the orphanage, looked at her in a strange way. This look was noticed by the girl, and she asked what was wrong. The guy at the same moment smiled welcomingly and said that everything was fine, and then invited the interlocutor to come to visit him. Camille refused. It seemed to her that it was too early to be alone with Stephen. The young man, when he heard that Camille did not want to visit, said reproachfully, "And I thought we trusted each other, but it turned out to be completely different. I get the feeling you think I'm a monster. You're wrong. You're a nice guy, but I'd rather get some fresh air than sit in an apartment. But it's better to get some fresh air than to sit in an apartment. You and I have plenty of time. Take me up on my offer. By the way, I have a large soap collection. I know my hobby sounds weird, but I collect soap. Interesting." With a smile said a girl and thought, "And why not really come to visit? Well, at least for an hour." The young man, seeing the doubts of the interlocutor, immediately said, "I'll get you home safe and sound, and you will choose the soap you like. You can even have several and take it from me as president." The girl looked at Stephen and agreed. The couple got into the car and the car started. Camille was riding in a foreign car for the first time. She was inspecting the interior. The young man was discreetly observing it. When the girl turned her attention to the road, the guy asked if she liked the car. Camille enthusiastically concluded that the car was wonderful. She added that it must be very expensive. Stephen voiced the cost, and the interlocutor, nodded. The driver, seeing her reaction, laughed. Soon the couple was already in Stephen's apartment. The girl immediately assessed the atmosphere and softly mumbled that everything here is arranged with taste. The young man smiled and replied that it was the merit of his mother. And then the owner of the apartment offered the guests to drink a glass of sparkling wine. But Camille flatly refused. Then Stephen opened the bar and took out a bottle of liquor from there. He dug it out and splashed the liquid into the shot glasses with the words, "I bought it when I suggested you buy it from Aristov. This drink is not quoted in the orphanage. You must be used to Belenka." The girl from these words of the guy shuddered as from a blow, and sharply said that she does not use strong drinks at all, and then said that if he once again allowed himself to talk to her in this way, then their communication on this note stops. The guy smiled in response and asked his guest to relax, promising that he would not allow himself to do that again. And then Stephen poured himself a strong drink and emptied the glass. The girl, seeing this, involuntarily wrinkled her nose. Then she asked to see the soap collection. The owner of the apartment cordially agreed to fulfill Camille's request and invited her into the bathroom, where the original shelf on the entire wall was pierced, on which were arranged pieces of soap. The girl began to look at the collection with curiosity. Meanwhile, the young man had left the bathroom and had another 100 grams of hard liquor before returning to his visit. Stephen watched as Camille stood on tiptoe and took out first one bar of soap, which she brought to her nose and inhaled the aroma, and then the next. The man felt at that moment A desire to possess this girl right now at this moment enveloped him, and he wrapped his arms around Camille and his hands and turns her to face him, and then starts to tear off the girl's blouse. Camille screamed out loudly for him to leave her alone. However, the guy picked up the guest in his arms and carried her to the couch. Camille was already well aware of what the owner of the apartment was going to do. And then she screamed, "Stop, please. I don't want it to happen like this. After all, I haven't been intimate with a man once before. Not to build for myself, not to cross the road from the orphanage. And they've been doing it there since they were 12. Just be a decent girl now, and we'll give each other pleasure." Camille tried to push the young man away, but the forces were unequal, and after a while Stephen lay on his back and breathed often. And the girl, tucking her legs under her belly, barely audible, was crying. The owner of the apartment, literally after a few minutes from breathing, said, "And you did not deceive me. It turned out, in fact, pious diva, but you pass. You liked it too, didn't you? But tell me the truth, I will now rest, and we can continue." After these words, the girl jumped to her feet and ran to the kitchen, where she grabbed a knife. As soon as Stephen began to approach her, she screamed exhaustedly that she would take her own life if he came near her. The landlord snorted and calmly replied, "I don't need to touch you. I've had mine. Now you can go to all four sides. By the way, you can choose a few bars of soap from the collection. That's your pleasure fee. If you want to meet me, you'll find my address here. Oh, and one more thing. Don't go to the police because my father has connections there. You're only hurting yourself by doing this." The girl looked at the guy with hatred and quickly got dressed, then ran out of the apartment. Camille knew that it was a long way for her to get home, and it would be better to take transportation. But she felt like people knew what had just happened and were looking at her with judgment. So Camille decided that she would get home on her own. Soon the girl was already in the apartment, where she immediately rushed into the bathroom. She wanted to wash herself off with the touch of Stephen's hands. Camille rubbed her body with exasperation, silent. Then Camille sank to the bottom of the tub and sobbed bitterly. The next day, Camille asked the director of the flower pavilion for a day off. The girl told the supervisor that she felt disgusting. The supervisor advised her to call a doctor and said she would work by herself for a few days, while Camille is not feeling well. The girl has been manifesting at home for several days. She did not answer her neighbor's calls, and also the cleaner of the orphanage. Camille just wanted to be at home for a while and hoped that she would succeed. However, Evelyn thought quite differently, who was concerned that the ward was not answering her calls, and the elderly woman initially went to the girl's workplace, and after finding out why Camille was absent from the pavilion, she had already gone to her home. The elderly woman rang the doorbell for a long time, and then, realizing she wouldn't get that one opened, said loudly, "I know you're home. If you don't open the door, I'll break it down. And you know very well that I will." Camille, knowing the temper of the cleaning lady, I realized that Evelyn would do as the girl said, opened the door and saw the worried face, the elderly woman. Camille smiled tiredly and invited the guest to pass. Evelyn looked at the wards and sternly asked what had happened. Camille did not want to tell the cleaning lady anything, and so she lied to her that she had quarreled with a young man. The guests looked at the girl with amazement and muttered, "That's the guy you're killing for. The one you just met. I don't understand you. Did you fall in love so quickly? Let's go to the kitchen and have a cup of tea, and you can tell me all about it." Camille realized that Evelyn would have to lie, so she quickly made up stories. She told the elderly woman that she had quarreled with the young man because he had forbidden her to work. The guest, hearing the explanation, only laughed and remained silent. "That's a silly reason for a quarrel. You should have told your boyfriend that you need something to live on. And if he's going to support you, let him do it. I'm not gonna tell him anything. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Maybe I could have a mother-son talk with him. No way. Better tell me how things are going at the orphanage." The landlady spoke, trying to distract Evelyn from the dangerous topic. Time moved slowly. Camille went to work and then went straight home. Stephen did not appear in her life. What was the girl glad of? She wanted to cut this man out of her life completely and never think of him. So Camille got up in the morning as usual. She had to go to work. As Camille felt sick, she rushed to the restroom, where she immediately threw up. The girl was puzzled as to what had happened to her, but immediately she tried to put all thoughts about her health aside as she had to get ready for work. Camille hoped that the nausea would go away during the day, but it did not. The young woman came home irritated after a day of work. She was depressed about her own physical condition and did not even eat dinner that day. She went to bed early. The next day, the same thing happened again. The girl felt nauseous all the time. After work, she went to the store to buy milk, which she loved very much and allowed herself to buy on rare occasions. Camille went to the counter and wanted to take a bottle. She realized that if she took even a sip of milk, she would immediately vomit. Camille did not buy anything and went home. When she got home, the girl sat down on the bed. The doorbell rang. Camille opened it and saw a neighbor who was holding fried pies on a plate. The woman unceremoniously entered the apartment and spoke. "I want to treat you to some baked goods. I happened to buy fuel milk today." "Oh, don't even remind me of milk. It makes me sick at one word," said the girl, looking at her saliva. "I don't understand you. You've always loved milk, and now you're sick of it. I've been sick of it since yesterday. I thought it would go away today, but it didn't. How's your stool?" "It's fine. I'm walking. It's not poisoning. You know, sweetheart, all your symptoms indicate that you're pregnant. I have a pretty good idea who the father of this baby is. I've seen your young man out the window a few times with you, only now he's gone missing. If I were you, I'd go to the drugstore and get a test. I'm not a gynecologist, but trust me, you're definitely in the right place. Don't be silly. I won't drink tea because I'm tired at work. I'm sleepy." With a slightly noticeable irritation, muttered the landlady of the apartment, who at this minute wanted Wendy to go to her room. The neighbor, hearing that she was being beaten about missing, resentfully pressed her lips together and quickly left. As soon as the woman left the apartment, Camille began to pack quickly. She only wanted to buy a pregnancy test after Wendy's words. The girl was able to allow the thought that she could have gotten pregnant by the rascal. Camille bought the test and persevered with the appropriate procedure. The girl was very worried. She absolutely did not want to give birth to a child from Stephen, who had done such a thing to her. When the test showed positive results, Camille squatted down and cried desperately. The young woman did not know what to do in this situation. The first thing that came to mind was to talk to Evelyn and tell her everything honestly. Camille received a call from the cleaning lady and asked her to come to visit her tomorrow. The elderly woman readily agreed and asked what to take for tea. Camille replied that there was no need to bring any guests since she had Krieger. Evelyn wanted to ask her mentee something else, but she said that the whole conversation would take place tomorrow. The next day in the evening, the old woman was already sitting at Camille's house. The landlady, with her head down, told how she had visited Stephen and how it had all ended. Evelyn listened attentively to Camille and asked what she was going to do. Camille tearfully said she wanted to terminate the pregnancy. When the guest heard this, she said softly, "And you are sure of your decision? Very often it happens that after such procedures women can no longer have children. But we have modern medicine, and I have nothing to fear. Just understand, if I give birth to this child, this baby will remind me all the time what he did. I am afraid that I hate this child. I'm also afraid that the child will inherit the father's genes and be just as much of a rascal in life. Wait, this is where it all comes together. Is that too much to be afraid of? Let me get this straight. What about medicine? You know, there's a saying that goes, there's a silver lining. That's the case with you. Let's move on. That the child will resemble his father, but it won't. As soon as you put the baby to the breast to feed, you'll realize that this baby is yours alone. Now, about genes. What do genes have to do with it? You're gonna raise the baby. What you put into it is what you'll reap. I'm not in any way trying to talk you into keeping the baby. I'm just trying to make you realize that you have to make these decisions consciously, not in haste, when emotions are running high. And that's what you're going through right now. My advice to you is to go to a gynecologist and make sure that you are pregnant, since tests can also give wrong results. If the pregnancy is confirmed, then check with the doctor until what term you can think about whether to keep the baby or not. And only after that, make a decision. After a while, Camille had already been to the women's clinic and knew for sure that she was in an interesting position. The young woman had contradictory feelings. On the one hand, she was pleased that life had begun inside her. But on the other hand, when she thought of Stephen, she felt disgusted with the child. Camille procrastinated for a long time and then made the choice that she would give birth to this baby, and it would be a joy in her life. The young woman was informed about her decision by the orphanage worker, who was happy to hear the news and immediately said that she would give the stroller as a gift as a grandmother. After Evelyn learned that the ward would give birth, she came to visit her and from the threshold said that it was necessary to have a serious talk. Camille was surprised at this and invited the elderly woman into the guest room and sat down and looked at the landlady carefully and only then spoke. Having a baby is good, but you need to think about the financial side. You have to persuade your manager to make you an official salesperson. That way you'll get an allowance. And if she refuses, find a way to get the director of the flower pavilion to agree. You'll need that money to live on in the future. You know, I don't just give advice. After all, I've lived most of my life already. And please don't put off this conversation with your supervisor until later. Camille, after this conversation with Evelyn, turned to her supervisor. Jenna promised to think about it. And now a month has passed since that conversation, and the supervisor has remained silent on the subject. Camille again talked to her supervisor about official employment. Jenna promised that she would do it in a week. However, a month passed, but the supervisor did not lift a finger on the matter. And when Camille tried to talk about it again, the supervisor pointed to the young woman's slightly bulging belly and said, "Do you want me to pay you benefits? But that's not going to happen. Why would I transfer my money to nowhere?" "You don't say." "What do you mean, nowhere? This money will be a great help to us. As soon as the baby's old enough, I'm going back to work for you." My answer to you: "No, you work one more week and then I'm firing you. You're a good girl." "Yeah, she's helping the unmarried. And I'm not going to." Camille was stunned by Jenna's answer. Camille seemed to have developed a good relationship with her supervisor. After all, when the supervisor asked to stay longer after the workday, the girl willingly complied with her request. And now that Camille had been refused, she was extremely offended that she had received such a reward for all her hard work. Camille recounted this conversation with the director of Evelyn's flower pavilion. The elderly woman was outraged after hearing the news. She wanted to go and talk to Jenna herself and tell the manager that she was acting illegally. That's one thing. And secondly, decent people don't do that. Camille talked the old lady out of it. She said, "You won't get anything out of it. I worked unofficially, and that says it all. It's my own fault for not having thought of this earlier, to formalize an employment contract." Soon Camille was out of work. The young woman was handed as she realized that the salary she received after she stopped working in the flower pavilion would not be enough for a long time. So Camille began to pound various structures in order to find some kind of work before the payment of maternity benefits. However, she was denied everywhere, and seeing that she is in an interesting position, and still the young woman found a job. True, it paid a pittance. The girl had to hand out advertising booklets on the street. Camille realized that she earns a pittance here, but at the moment she was happy about it. Time flew by, and now the young woman gave birth to a baby girl, whom she named Vanessa. Camille fondly felt the little bundle and mentally thanked the cleaning lady, who had made her realize that the decision should be made without any violent thoughts. Camille realized that it was only thanks to that conversation with the technician that she had kept the baby under her heart. And now that baby was born from the maternity ward. Camille was greeted by Evelyn. The elderly woman accepted the small package from the nurse's hands and suddenly cried. Camille was puzzled why the cleaning lady was crying now and asked her about it. "You should be happy. Are you crying?" "Why? I'm glad you made the right decision at the right time. And now I answer to my granddaughter." Time has slowly moved on. Camille enjoyed learning the role of a mother. She was busy practicing with her daughter. All the motherly duties she lovingly performed. And even when Vanessa switched from day to night, it didn't work for the young woman to have to adjust to a child. It had been a month since Camille had become a mom. And at this point, Camille clearly realized that the allowance was completely inadequate for living. Her daughter needed to buy formula, which cost a lot of money, and she also had to buy shipping, oils, baby soap, and other baby products for the baby. The young woman was at a loss, and it was the first time she had not paid her utility bill. Another 2 months passed. Camille lost weight during this time, as she denied herself food, only to be fed. Camille's daughter helped Evelyn, but only in small amounts. The elderly woman saw perfectly well how difficult it was for her ward, and one day a conversation took place between the cleaning lady and Camille. Camille said to the technician in despair, "I don't know what to do. I was already thinking of putting my daughter in an orphanage for a while and visiting her there. And as soon as she's a little older, I'll take her out of there and get a job in the meantime. That's the stupidest decision I've ever heard. If you do that, you'll lose Vanessa forever. You'd have to give up your parental rights if you did that. Do you even think about what you're saying? I don't know how to make ends meet." With tears in her eyes, said the girl, and immediately added, "Other children at this age have cribs. My daughter still sleeps in the stroller you gave us. The crib is not the most important thing. I'll try to give you a little more money. I don't feel comfortable accepting finances from you anymore. I don't know when I'll be able to pay you back. I'd like to get a job, and then everything will change." After this conversation, about 2 weeks passed, and Evelyn came to visit Camille. The old woman went into the kitchen and put a box with a long cake on the table. The landlady looked at her guest with bewilderment and asked what kind of celebration. The cleaning lady smiled and said, "Celebrating my dismissal from work. I've become too old to carry big buckets of water, and now I've decided to retire. And the salary at the orphanage is tiny. I'll be with Vanessa from now on. And you're trying to get a job, but you still need to help your son. I haven't forgotten about that. They'll cut back on their rations. There's no other option. Although there is one other option, which is to go to the father, establish paternity with DNA, and then demand child support from him. Don't ever say that to me again. I'll never go to what? This is my child and mine alone. Consider me." Vanessa started from the wind in the field with a challenge, exclaimed Camille. "You see, so there's only one way out. I sit busy and you look for a job. Did I like the way you stood up to Stephen just now?" Evelyn said with a smile. A few days later, Camille got a job as a salesman in a small market not far from home. The young woman was attracted by the fact that the market had a convenient schedule. It was necessary to come to 7 o'clock, and the Labor Day ended at 14:00. The only thing that marred the girl was not particularly high wages, about which she told Evelyn. The old woman said in response that she found something to be upset about. "Your salary is higher than the one I received when I worked in the orphanage." Soon Camille went to work. She was a little uneasy, as she had never worked with weighty goods. However, her employer explained everything in detail and spent the day with her, helping the girl to cope with selling vegetables. And so already Camille worked for 3 days at the market. Here the girl met her neighbor Molly, who was selling fruit. The women talked to each other, and Molly in one of the conversations unexpectedly dropped that Camille had hired an employer for nothing. The woman looked at her interlocutor with surprise and asked her why she had said that. Molly embarrassed Cashin, and then, waving her hand, spoke out. "And what will I hide it from you? All the same, after all, the truth will tell you others. The thing is that your boss, Nancy, very often changed salespeople. Regular customers will tell you that soon enough. I've had a couple of people tell me that there's a new salesperson again, but I didn't pay much attention to it. And why Nancy and the salesman do not linger. The answer is simple, constant shortages. At Sveta's, the longest that the sellers have worked is 4 months, as far as I remember. A few days after this conversation, there was an unpleasant incident at Camille's workplace. Toward the end of the workday, as usual, Nancy and her husband arrived to pick up the proceeds. Camille counted out the money and held it out to the supervisor, who looked at the financials and grudgingly said that the amount was too small. Camille narrowed her eyes and replied that they had overpriced vegetables, and customers often left for competitors. Nancy, hearing this, said that one should be able to interest the person who approached the goods and not rely on high prices. The businesswoman then approached the vegetables and inspected them meticulously. Nancy then saw some affected tomatoes. She took out the tomatoes and placed them in front of Camille. The woman looked at the woman perplexed and said quietly, "Vegetables have a way of spoiling. It's not my fault. I agree with you on that. But spoiled goods should be weighed and recorded and kept separately. But I did. I just didn't have time to put these tomatoes aside," Camille said, and quickly took out a notebook in which she wrote down the spoiled vegetables. The girl held out her notes to Nancy. The businesswoman took a quick look at the notebook and spoke in a stern voice. "All this will be deducted from your wages. And now these tomatoes can be taken to your home. How's that? And yesterday's game was cucumbers. I gave them to you. Are you going to take them out of my paycheck too? But that's not fair." Almost crying, said the girl. "It's not for me to teach you how to work with goods. You did not rush to me, so you should do your job. If you see that you have a spoilage of this or that kind of vegetables, you try to block it. From this day on, you are responsible for all spoiled tomatoes, cucumbers, and so on." Camille was walking home after a day's work in high spirits. As soon as she entered the apartment, Evelyn approached her and raised her index finger to her lips. That meant it was worth talking in a whisper. It meant it was worth talking in whispers since Vanessa was asleep. The old woman, seeing Camille in a bad mood, immediately realized that the girl was in trouble. She asked Camille to go to the kitchen and asked her what was wrong. The girl took out the tomatoes and put them on the table. And only then she told what had happened. And at the end of her narrative, she added, "I don't know how to weigh people. I am ashamed to do it. I will not hide that I add a few grams somewhere. I was advised to do so by a neighbor who sells nearby. But how can I answer the customers if I have a kilogram of tomatoes, for example, will rot? Do not be upset. From work a month and see what salary you get. If it will be pennies, then there's nothing to stay there." A month went by and an audit was done. Nancy informed Camille that there was a shortage and told her the amount. The girl was already ready for it, so without too many questions, the businesswoman offered to deduct the shortage. Then she informed Nancy that she was no longer working for her. The next day, Camille again went to look for work at the market where she worked. The girl did not want to go, and that was one reason not to go out with Nancy. Camille decided that it was possible to find a position as a vendor at the bazaar, which was a few stops away from her home. The girl remembered Evelyn's advice, and so she wanted to get a job selling piece goods. Camille was lucky right away. She saw several advertisements at the entrance to the market for sellers. Camille approached one employer, and he said he would be happy to hire her. The girl immediately asked about the salary, and the man voiced the amount. Camille has been drinking since morning, looked at the entrepreneur, and said that this is paltry money. The employer smirked and said, "I do not know you, my dear, so there will be a trial period. If we work out, well, in the sense that there will be no shortages, then in a couple of months your salary will increase. That's what all the entrepreneurs do around here. Maybe you should check it out." The girl sighed dejectedly and agreed to the man's proposal. And then she went on to look at the other sellers' merchandise. It was only when Camille walked a little farther away that she was stopped by a woman who was selling toys. The stranger spoke up. "I heard that you are tuning up for work. Well, I can tell you that all these entrepreneurs promise to raise wages after a while, but not all of them keep their promises. Are you saying that the man I hired will cheat me too? I don't know anything about him. I'm talking about me. I've been working here for about 4 months now, and I've had no complaints. And I was promised a raise. They're still giving me a raise. I'm out of options, so I'm going to have to take my chances and work for this man." Camille left the market after talking to the saleswoman and went to the bus stop. The girl felt disappointed that things were going wrong for her. She thought she would find a job where she would get a great salary, but everything turned out to be exactly the opposite. Soon the bus pulled up. The girl entered the transportation and sat down on the empty seats, but 2 girls were already sitting against her and talking animatedly. Camille, to distract herself from bitter thoughts, involuntarily began to listen to the dialogue of strangers. Initially, Camille realized that they were 2 former classmates who had met after a while and were discussing their peers who were in the same class. Soon Camille got tired of listening to the girls and wanted to turn her attention to the view from the window. So she heard what the brunette said, addressing her interlocutor. "Do you remember Miranda from our class, who always wore her older sister's clothes? We used to make fun of her for it all the time. You wouldn't believe it. I saw her the other day at the coffee shop where I was sitting with my son. I was stunned at how Katya looked originally. I didn't even believe it was her. I called out her name. Miranda smiled at me and moved to the table next to me. I stared at her with my mouth hanging open. It was a luxurious girl, which is immediately obvious that she visits expensive beauty salons. About the way she is dressed, I'm not talking at all. She has fashionable pants, a suit of such a coastal color, and in that to it in sandals. Practically on all fingers descendants and a gold ring. If in general to say, then in front of me was a stylish girl who knows her own price. Katya, whom we knew as the poorest in school. Probably married well, replied the person I was talking to. But you are wrong. She is not married, and is not even in a hurry. Then how did she succeed in life? The second girl asked, perplexed. This was curious for me too, and I asked her about it. Miranda answered that she earns money with her body. She said it so simply that I was very sweet of her answer. I asked her if doing it for money is disgusting. The answer was simple. Miranda said that now she can afford what she wants to do. And as for whether it is disgusting or not, she said that she treats it like a job. I was taken aback by this news. I don't even have the words to describe it. And further, Camille did not hear what the brunette said in response, because after the lecturer announced Camille's stop, the girl got off the bus and went home, thinking about the conversation between the 2 former classmates. Just then, the young woman saw a bench and sat down on it. She thought about this Miranda who earns money this way. Camille sat for a while as a call came from her neighbor. Wendy reported that Evelyn had become ill and had been rushed to the hospital. Then the neighbor added that Vanessa was at her place. Camille rose abruptly from the bench and ran home. The young woman immediately went to her, where she learned that Evelyn suddenly felt pain in her chest and called Wendy. She in turn called an ambulance, and the older woman was hospitalized. Camille was frightened. She was worried about the pensioner's condition. Camille called the hospital to find out how Evelyn was doing, but I answered that the woman was now in intensive care and all answers would not be available until the next day. Camille slumped down in her chair after the call. She already realized that tomorrow she would not go to any work because Vanessa had no one to leave her with. And also the girl realized that the pensioner would need medicine, which means that she would need finances. All these thoughts made the young woman cry. She was well aware that there was nowhere to go for help at the moment. The next day, Camille put her daughter in the stroller and went to the hospital. Camille mentally asked the Almighty to make Evelyn feel better. The girl was very afraid of losing her dear person. And here it was not that the old woman helped financially, but in another way, that the pensioner supported Camille morally and did not let her be discouraged. Soon Camille was already sitting in the hospital room opposite Evelyn, who had already been brought back from intensive care. The girl stroked the elderly woman's hand and asked her to hold on. The pensioner smiled at the ward and replied, "To me, don't worry, I made it through. But how will you be now?" "Alone, we are slowly leaving. I have an idea. Let's call your son to come here. It would be nice for you to see him. You're going about it the wrong way, sweetheart. I'm not going to die, so let your son come here when he gets a chance. And if you're implying that you're asking him for financial help, forget it. My son is having a hard time too. He's paying a mortgage, and he has 3 kids to feed, clothe, and shoe. All right, calm down. I didn't mean to ask him for help. I just thought it would do you good to see your son and get you back on your feet. The turkey thought I was screwed too," he said sternly. "And the woman." And then she said more softly, "All right, I knew you meant what you said out of the goodness of your heart. You'd better tell me that your job is going great. They said you'd be out in a week. So you have exactly 1 week to rest and get back into action," said Camille Savrasov. Having worked soon, Camille returned home with her daughter after the hospital. The young woman played with Utah for a while and then fed her and put her to bed. Afterward, she sat down on the couch and thought about her deception about Evelyn's job. Camille suddenly realized that she had not just told a lie to the older woman. It had been done intentionally. Camille had made the decision even then that she would go to the track to earn money. The realization that she would be selling her body no longer frightened the girl. Camille realized that she simply had no way out. It would be possible to go to work as a salesman, but the young woman already knew that she lacked the so-called salesmanship. This meant that Camille would have to pay for shortages or damaged goods. You could also work as a dishwasher, but it paid a pittance, and the other girl was not given, as there was no appropriate education. And so Camille decided to go to the highway. After a while, Evelyn was discharged from the hospital. The pensioner was taken away by Camille and her daughter. The girl fondly hugged the old woman and said that she would not allow her to be sick anymore. Evelyn smiled at her ward's words and promised. Evelyn smiled at her mentee's words and promised not to do it at all. A few more days passed after the discharge of the pensioner. Camille informed the elderly woman that she was going to work tomorrow. Evelyn asked the girl what her job was. Camille thought for a while and replied, "How can I put it to you so you understand? Basically, I have to go around the world. Basically, I have to go to businesses and collect signatures. Why collect them? I won't tell you yet, because it's gonna be a rotating assignment every few days. But the upside is that I'll be paid by the number of signatures, which means as soon as I complete the assignment, we'll have the money. That's a weird job. It's the first time I've heard of such a job," the older woman said, perplexed. "There's nothing strange about it. We are not living in the Stone Age after all. There are many specialties now that you have never even heard of. I'm not going to argue with you. You'd better tell me everything after the first day of work." So Camille is getting ready for work. Evelyn is puzzled and asks the mentees why the working day starts so late, and the time was around 15 o'clock. Camille quickly finds an answer and says that at this time, people are better in contact, and therefore the opportunity to collect more signatures increases. And then the girl added that this way she could earn more money. After a while, Camille stood on the highway. She, so that the pensioner did not guess anything, bought a mini skirt and a blouse with a deep neckline in advance. In all these clothes, the girl changed before going out on the highway. And here already Camille stands on the road and waits for the truck. Initially, cars stopped in front of her, and the drivers offered Camille a ride. However, the girl immediately decided that she needed chauffeurs who work as truckers. She herself did not understand why this decision came to her mind, and soon a truck slowed down in front of Camille. A man's head peeked out of the cab. The driver evaluated the girl and offered her a ride. Camille smiled and got into the driver's cab. The man once again looked at her traveling companion and said, "You must be new here, because I haven't seen you here before. And you, I see that you are already a regular here, if you know everyone," said the girl, trying to say so that her voice did not shake from excitement. However, the man as if caught her inner state, and so he asked, "You are obviously going to do this case for the first time. Don't worry, I won't hurt you. I know the rates, and I will pay even a little more than what is required." After a while, Camille was already out of the cab. The young woman adjusted her skirt, and at the same moment heard a man shouting to her that she was gorgeous and that he would like to meet her again. The girl reluctantly waved him off and walked slowly down the road. At the moment, Camille felt dirty. She couldn't stand the urge to shower to wash off the stranger's touch. But Camille forced herself to think about the fact that this was just a job that would help her and not live. The young woman came home. Already as before the evening, Evelyn looked anxiously at the ward, but the latter smiled amiably and said that there was the first earnings, and handed the pensioner the money. The old woman looked at the money and frightenedly said, "Wow, a decent amount for one working day. Today was just a lucky day. There was only one task that needed to be done today. So I tried to collect more signatures. I had to visit a lot of different agencies, but it was worth it. I don't like you coming home alone so late. You're a girl who knows what can happen. You better get fewer signatures and come home earlier. You know, there's a popular wisdom that you can't make all the money you want. That goes for you. We'll see. And now we should be happy that we have finances, and we will be able to buy, not a crib, so that the child sleeps not in a stroller. I'm also very tired as I've been walking a lot. So can I take a shower and go to bed?" Evelyn offered the girl to eat first, and then already take hygienic procedures, but Camille refused. The young woman wanted to actually take a shower and just forget about what she had done today of her own free will. As soon as Camille got to the bed and Evelyn, who had stayed with her tonight because Camille had come home late, was lying next to her, she felt ashamed. The landlady turned to the pensioner in a whisper and apologized for the late visit. The guest stroked her ward in response and asked her not to worry about nothing. Only after these words, Evelyn Camille calmly sighed. Immediately, she was struck by an electric shock. She realized that, doing such work, she had not thought about the most important thing, that she could get pregnant. Camille immediately decided that she would buy birth control tomorrow. The next day, Camille didn't go anywhere. What surprised the pensioner? The elderly woman asked why Camille had the day off today. The girl laughed in response and said that she would not have a job every day. Camille could not admit to Evelyn that today she simply did not want to go to the track, as there was still a residue on her soul from the way she had earned the money. It had been 2 days since Camille had given pleasure to the driver of the truck. It was only after that that the young woman decided to go out on the highway again. It was not an easy decision for her, and it was as if felt by Evelyn, who asked the girl where her office with the management was located. Camille realized that if she didn't make a precise schedule of the so-called work, the pensioner would sound the alarm and start to find out everything herself. So Camille decided that from this day forward, she would go out to the track once every 3 days. Camille had already been working in this way for 2 weeks. During that time, the girl bought her daughter a crib. Camille realized that she could not go on like this forever, and she comforted herself with the fact that it was only until her daughter grew up a little. And then the girl planned to give Anya to the kindergarten and herself to enroll in correspondence studies at the institute. And so Camille once again went out on the highway. She was waiting for a truck, and at the same time remembered the movie Pretty Woman. She liked this movie very much. The girl imagined herself in the role of the main character and dreamed that she would one day happen in her life. She wanted to meet a prince on a white horse who will pull her out of the swamp and will love not only her, but also Anya that. However, the young woman understood that this will not happen, as it only happens in movies, where the plot is invented to interest the viewer. And yet the girl still dreamed about it, realizing that it would not happen to her. Reflections and the girl was interrupted by a stopped car. Camille looked into the car, and from horror, the whole transport belonged to the husband of her neighbor. And this meant that now the man would start asking unnecessary questions about what she was doing on the highway. And in fact, the car door opened, and the neighbor looked out and said in surprise, "Camille, I didn't expect to see you here. What are you doing here?" "My wife told me you got a job." "That's right, Wendy. But it's my day off. And here I am waiting for a young man. Let's just say I have a date. I'll ask you not to tell your spouse about this. She'll be asking me all kinds of questions." "That's right." Laughing, the man said. And then he added, "My Wendy, curious person wants to know everything about everyone. Only that you chose a meeting with your boyfriend in a not very convenient place." "Yeah, I already realized that." As soon as the neighbor left, Camille breathed a sigh of relief. She'd expected a lot more questions from Wendy's husband, and there weren't many. Now the girl was only worried that the neighbor would not tell about their encounter on the road. Camille knew very well that Wendy often met with Evelyn and could tell the elderly woman that Camille was standing on the highway. And if the old woman found out about it, she wouldn't let up until she knew the whole truth. Camille, on the other hand, absolutely did not want Evelyn to know the way she made her money. A few days passed. Camille was once again standing on the highway, waiting for a truck. And then a beautiful black Jeep stopped in front of her. Two big guys jumped out of the cabin, who picked up the girl under the elbows and quickly pushed her into the car. The young woman did not even have time to shout, as she was already in the Jeep. And here an obese man turned to her from the front seat, who looked at her carefully and then asked her how long she had been doing this. Camille was startled and said she did not know what he was talking about. Her phrase made the stranger angry, and he spoke harshly. "You don't make a pie girl of yourself here. This is my territory. And I have already been informed that there is a young lady who works without taxes, and as it turns out, this young lady is you. So let's be honest. Otherwise, my boys are gonna have a different conversation with you." Camille, looking at the stranger, clearly realized that it was not worth lying to this man, because he would keep his word. The girl admitted that she had been out on the track for a little less than a month, and immediately added that she didn't do it every day. Hearing the young woman's retort, the man nodded contentedly. Then he said softly, "My name is Sam. Now I see that you're telling the truth, and you're a good girl, because you figured it out the first time. Now listen to what I have to say. You work on my territory, which means I have to pay tax to the treasury, like any decent citizen. But the treasury for you will not be the state, but my pocket. And in general, on the first of every month, you will bring me a sum of money to my address. If you don't, you realize you'll be dealing with my boys sitting next to you. Now tell me what you got." "I've got you scared," the girl muttered fearfully. "That's great. It's a pleasure doing business with you," said the man, and handed Camille a piece of paper on which was written an address and a sum of money. Camille looked at the entry and the window, and then said, But this is a large sum. It's almost half of what I'll earn in a month, and who has an easy life these days? You see, I'm not an unemployment fund. I want to eat good food too. And if you don't like this amount, go work at the factory as a laborer. I didn't force you to go to the highway, so you decide what's good for you. Anyway, this is a short conversation. Either you pay or you're out of here. And I'm waiting for your decision right now." "Okay, I'll do it." After that, the young woman was allowed out of the car. And as soon as Camille left the car, the Jeep drove off. Camille looked after the car and tears rolled down her cheeks. She realized that from now on, she would have to pay back almost half of the money she had earned. After this conversation, the young woman decided that today she would not work. After a while, the girl was already at home. She entered the apartment and saw the surprised face of the pensioner, who asked why she did not come so early. Camille glumly replied that the day had not gone well and there were no errands to run. Evelyn looked at the girl carefully and said sternly, Don't tell me fairy tales here. Tell me what really happened. I've known you for years, and I can see that you're worried. Camille was about to tell me the truth about where and how she made her money. But then she looked at Evelyn. She felt ashamed to tell the old woman. The girl collected the pensioner again and wrote tall tales that she had not been paid for her assignment today. Evelyn, inquisitive, looked at the interlocutor and helped. I hope you are not deceiving me. And about the fact that they paid, I understand that it's frustrating. But you can't be too upset about it. Every job has a slip-up. You had one. All right, calm down. Come on, I'll feed you and tell you how we fought the duck today. After Evelyn's words, the girl sighed with relief that the conversation on a dangerous topic was over. And then together with the pensioner went to the kitchen, where she listened to the elderly woman, who enthusiastically told how she spent the day sonnets. The next day, Camille felt ill. She had a fever and a sore throat. Camille realized she had a cold. The young woman wrote about herself as she realized that it was impossible to be sicker now. After all, it was urgent to earn money to pay tribute to the track. Soon, Evelyn arrived at Camille's house and immediately announced that the labor activity would cease for the time being. Camille, as soon as she heard this with a sad smile, said that these were the words she had expected from Evelyn. In response, she said, "Don't think I'm such a predictable madam. I'll call a doctor and persuade the doctor to put you in the hospital. You don't have to do that. You're a doctor, so treat me with us agreed, but only sick. You will follow all my instructions." With a smile, said Evelyn, specifically addressing Daddy's ward. Camille recovered. 7 days later, she wanted to go to work again, but she was prevented from doing so by a pensioner. The elderly woman said that Camille had not yet recovered from her illness and needed to stay at home for a couple more days. There was nothing left for the girl to do, only to agree with Evelyn's decision. 2 days later, Camille was already standing on the highway. She was thinking about how to raise the necessary amount for Wendy. The young woman realized that she was not ready to go to work every day, but she also realized that it was necessary to give the money. And then one solution came to her mind, that one day it was necessary to double the number of clients, and only she thought about it as a truck stopped in front of her. The girl climbed into the cab and closed the door and then turned to the driver. Immediately, with fear, she faintly shuddered. In front of her sat the man who had robbed her of her innocence. The young woman only wanted to get out of the car. As the young man menacingly ordered her not to move from her seat, and in doing so grabbed her arm, Camille expelled and asked Stephen to let her go. The guy grinned and said that she had willingly got into the vehicle, and then added that you were a pious lady offering your services on the highway. And at that time you did not make a road out of yourself. Well, let's see what you have managed to learn during this time. I can't wait to reminisce with an old acquaintance who picked up during this time of experience. They're gonna let me out of the car. And don't even think that I'm going to have fun with you, and you shouldn't shame me, since it's only to your credit that I'm out here on the highway making a living. You're the one who took my virginity against my will, and I got pregnant afterward. I have a young daughter who needs food, diapers, skates, etc., and my allowance isn't very high. And you knew I was an orphanage kid with no one to stand up for me. So you used your power that day. I hate you. Are you telling me you had my baby? That's an unexpected twist. Don't tell me you want to get child support from me now. You make money on the highway. Somebody got you pregnant, Stephen said defiantly. Even though you're the biological father of the child, I can assure you that we don't need your money. You can choke on your finances, and the fact that you have a daughter you can forget forever. And let's stop this stupid conversation. There's only one thing I don't understand right now. I mean, you're such a big shot. And you work as a trucker. That doesn't make sense. Okay, I don't want to waste my time with you. Let me get out of the car. I can't take care of myself. Camille tried to open the door of the truck, but she was pulled to her by Stephen force and tried to lift her skirt. The girl screamed in desperation and began to fight back. At that moment, a voice came from behind them. It was a man speaking to the driver. "Let her go right now." "What are you doing?" "Partner, you know I like to have fun with the girls on the road," Stephen said in a perplexed voice. "You'll find another girl on the way," the man replied. "Christopher, you're my partner, but in this case I don't understand you," said Stephen, and let the girl go. In the meantime, Camille glanced back and looked at the protector. He was a handsome middle-aged man who looked her straight in the eye. The girl nodded gratefully and started to open the door of the truck, but she was called by her partner Stephen. The young woman looked back and glanced questioningly at the man. At that moment, he took out a purse and took out some bills, which he immediately handed to Camille with the words, "This is enough for you and the little girl for the first time, and try to change your trade. It doesn't suit you. You'd better find another way to make money. Now go home to your daughter, who's sure to miss you." "But I can't take the money." "Just like that," Camille said. "You can. Take it and go. If I see you on the road again, they'll think you're a fallen woman," Christopher said sternly. The young woman took the money and nodded gratefully once more and quickly got out of the car. As soon as the young woman left the cab, the truck started at the same moment. Camille looked at the car and thought about the stranger's words. Camille stood for a while longer and then headed home. The girl thought that there was only one trouble for today. It was the meeting with Stephen, but she was wrong. Camille had just arrived home, so she saw that her neighbor was visiting. Camille said hello to her, but she said nothing and hurried away to her room. The girl looked at her neighbor with a puzzled look. Then she turned to Evelyn. "What's the matter with Wendy? I came in and she just ran off. She didn't even say hello, and I thought we'd had no quarrel with her." The pensioner didn't say a word in response. The old woman asked if she had earned it today. Camille girl with a smile replied that she received a good sum for work, and with these words began to take out her purse to show her finances. Camille took out the money and handed it to Evelyn with words, "Here, take at least part of it. I suggest that tomorrow we go to the market together and buy some goodies. How about it?" The pensioner approached the girl and took the money. The old woman studied the bills for a long time and then asked her mockingly what was Camille's task today. Camille immediately sensed a trick in Evelyn's question. She answered that today she was collecting signatures for the advertisement. The old woman laughed and then with a sharp movement threw the money in the face of her ward with the words, "Who did you decide to deceive?" And after this phrase, the pensioner snatched from Camille's hands a bag from which to shake out the clothes. Evelyn picked up the fallen short skirt from the floor, as well as a blouse with a deep neckline. The older woman held out the clothes to the girl and said reproachfully, "This is your uniform. When you collect signatures from truckers, don't give me any more fairy tales. Wendy saw you today, driving down the highway with her husband. A neighbor told me you were wearing those clothes when you got into the truck. She also told me that her husband had seen you on the road before. By the way, he's been getting the same shit from you. That you were on a date. How could you do something like that? Tell me, don't you hate what you're doing? Can you imagine what your daughter will think of you when she finds out? I'm ashamed of what you're doing right now. It's like you stabbed me in the back. I didn't expect you to deceive me like that. You." Evelyn shoved things into Camille's hands. Camille and silently went to the kitchen, where she sat down at the table, and not in a coffin, and cried softly. Camille came in after her and tried to hug the older woman, but the latter pushed her away. The girl realized that she had caused her dear one unbearable heartache. She wanted to say something in her defense, but there were no words. Camille knelt down in front of Evelyn and spoke loudly. "It's my fault, and I admit it. I know I have offended you very much, and I have nothing to say for myself. Believe me, I did not go to the track for my own pleasure, but only to survive. Just don't pretend you're poor. There are plenty of single moms who find a way to make ends meet, and they don't go selling their bodies. Like you did. Scold me with tears in my eyes directly killed Camille. I won't tell you anything else. I'll just leave now and try to forget that I ever met you. Small pennies. I'll pay you back. but we won't see each other anymore, and you can continue to go out for signatures on the highway," said the old woman and got up from the table. She wanted to take a step, but could not, for her knees were encompassed by Camille, who cried, sobbing profusely. For a few minutes the girl held Evelyn by the legs and then raised her face to the pensioner, and through her sobs said, "You may scold me with hurtful words. I bear it all. Just don't cut us out of your life. I promise you, on my knees, that I will never go out on the highway again. I don't know how I'll make a living yet, but believe me, I'll find a way. Just give me one chance. I beg you not to turn your back on us. You know very well that you're the only person we have close to us. I've only now realized what I can't lose. Believe me, I'm truly sorry for what I did, but I did not know how to get out of such a situation when there is no money, sometimes even for bread. I just ask you to believe that the money I brought today, it was not earned in this way. It was given to me by a stranger who saved me from Stephen. And that man gave me a good admonition too, that if he ever sees me on the highway again, he will consider me a fallen woman. He said the right words to you. All right, baby, if you promise me it won't happen again, we'll stick together. We'll try to forget this month completely, like it never happened. Now go see your daughter. I think she's awake," quietly spoke the old woman and stroked the girl's head. In the evening of that day, when the Evelyn players had already left, Camille thought about life. She realized that she had made a promise to the pensioner, and the girl knew that she would keep her word in any case, even if she had to starve. And at the moment, Camille was concerned with another question: where to find a part-time job. Camille spent a long time in her thoughts, and when she looked at the clock, she was surprised that already at 0:00 the young woman came to her daughter and admired the baby. Then the girl shared the bed and lay down, and at that moment for some reason she remembered the departure of her neighbor. Now Camille understood why Wendy had treated her so dryly. Camille decided that she had to talk to the neighbor tomorrow. 10 days passed. Camille kept her promise to Evelyn. Now when the pensioner came to Camille, the girl went to look for a job. And soon she was lucky to get a job as a dishwasher in a kindergarten. The salary was small, but Camille was happy with the money, and the schedule suited her. Another week flew by and Camille had a day off. The young woman decided to take her child for a walk at lunchtime. She had already started to get things to dress. The doorbell rang. Camille was surprised by it, as she was not expecting anyone, and especially Evelyn knew that she had a day off today and did not come these days. The girl then thought that was right. A neighbor came over to chat and hurriedly opened the door. However, it was not Wendy who turned out to be the evening, but a stranger who held a gorgeous bouquet of pink roses and a large fluffy bear. Camille looked at the man with surprise and immediately recognized him as the man who had given her money for nothing. The landlady was embarrassed to see Stephen's partner and spoke crumpled. "Hello, you must be here for the debt. How did you find me? You have a way of keeping guests on the doorstep. I'm glad you remembered me, though. That means you left a good impression of me. I'm not used to letting strangers into my home." "Oh my goodness," the man exclaimed, and then went on. "We're the ones who don't know each other. Perhaps you don't remember my name, but I remember yours perfectly well because I heard your whole conversation with Stephen. Only after I heard what that man did to you, that I did not let him do it again. My name is Christopher, by the way. I remember Stephen calling you Christopher. All right, come on in, but I'm warning you right away, I don't have the money to pay you back at the moment. And one more thing, I don't do that trade anymore. If you'd like to collect your debt in this equivalent, I gave the money freely and from the bottom of my heart. I really wanted you to stop doing this business," said the man and handed the girl flowers and a toy, and then crossed the threshold. "But I don't understand why you came to me," the young woman asked in surprise. "That's an interesting question, but I will answer you now. Initially agree that you will not call me you. Otherwise I feel like an old man. I'm only 31 years old. Now to answer your question, When I saw you in the car, I was struck by your looks. Then I thought you'd disappear and all my thoughts of you would be gone. But as time went on, I kept thinking about you. Then I realized that Cupid's arrow had accidentally pierced my heart, and thus I stand beside you." After these words, the crying of a child was heard from the room. The young woman rushed into the room. She put the flowers and the toy on the bed and picked up her daughter in her arms. Following, the mistress of the apartment followed the guest. The man looked at the little girl and softly said, "It seems to me that with a toy I hurried. You should have bought another set of rattles. Since your daughter is still a baby, you shouldn't have bought anything at all. By the way, my daughter's name is Vanessa. She's 5 months old. I forgot to ask you how you found me. Stephen gave me a beautiful name. He gave me the street, the house, the entrance. I had to find the apartment on my own." "Very interesting. Can you tell me why Stephen is a trucker? I mean, his father's not a poor man." "I'd be happy to share. He told me why it happened. But first I'd like you to offer me a seat. That's what hospitable hostesses usually do," the man said with a smile. The young woman hummed with embarrassment and offered the guest a chair, while she sat down on the bed with the baby. The girl turned to Christopher and looked questioningly at the man. The guest realized that he was expected to answer, and so began his story from the narration of the new acquaintance. The landlady learned that Stephen's father's business had failed and had to take a large loan from the bank to restore his own business. However, the finances did not help. Eventually, the business went bust, and there was a debt to the bank. And then it was decided to sell Stephen's apartment to pay off the debt. The young man's father could not bear it all and died suddenly. Stephen was left without money for life, and he had nothing to pay for his studies at the institute. So the guy dropped out of college and got a job as a trucker. Christopher told all this while looking at Camille, who was listening attentively. When the man finished the story, the girl smiled mysteriously, which did not hide from the guest, and he asked, "You must be gloating." "Not at all. I just think that Stephen will now understand how to live on a simple salary and not boast about daddy's money." "You're right about that. Stephen is the sole earner in the family now, since his mother never worked after marrying his father. And from what I understand, my partner's mom isn't going to do it. But I'm not interested in that anymore." "Me neither. We were gonna go for a walk. Go with the duck. You won't mind that. So you're gonna tell me about yourself." And soon the couple and the baby were walking in the park. Christopher told the girl he lived in a one-room apartment. He has been working as a trucker for 6 years. He likes this occupation, and also said that he was married. But the family life did not work out. He said that he likes to guess Japanese crossword puzzles and dreams of visiting the Northern Territory in the future. Hearing the man's last wish, Camille laughed and said, "Everyone wants to go to the south, but you want to go to the north. You are strange. It's very simple. My parents are from there, and they often talk about it. If only you could hear how enthusiastically my mother and father described the north. Why am I telling you this now? I'll get to know them. You'll hear it firsthand. What makes you think I'm going to meet them? Wait a minute. Don't be so quick to say no. It's not like I'm asking you to get into bed. I just want to start by courting you. And if everything turns out well, then we can create a family with you in the future." From the lack of the young man, with a laugh uttered Camille. The couple walked with the child for a while, and then Christopher walked the girl home, helped her carry the stroller to the 3rd floor, and at parting asked permission to call and visit. The girl responded to the young man with consent. A month passed as Christopher visited Camille for the first time. During this time, the couple met several times. They often called each other. The man always inquired about Vanessa's accomplishments to the young woman at each call. It was a pleasure. It didn't take long to fly by. Another month, Camille came home from work and was surprised to hear someone in her apartment speaking in a man's voice. She listened and recognized Christopher's voice. The girl went into the room and saw the man talking sweetly with Evelyn. The old woman saw the girl and said with a smile that Camille had come to visit them. Camille looked at Christopher with surprise, and he immediately knelt down on one knee in front of Camille, took out a small box from the pocket of his jeans, which he opened and handed to the girl with the words, "Here I am making you a marriage proposal. I met Evelyn without your permission and told this worthy woman how I love you. She said she would bless us only after you gave your consent. Now my fate is in your hands." Camille looked at Evelyn, confused initially, and then shifted her gaze to the man. The girl took a box from which she pulled out a thin wedding ring. She slipped the piece of jewelry onto her finger and admired it, taking her hand aside, then looked at Christopher again and asked quietly, "What about my job at the track? That's what you gave me, isn't it? You're going to remind me of that someday, aren't you? What kind of nonsense are you talking about? I believe I met you in a more romantic setting, like the day I first walked into this apartment. Make it look like I got the wrong address. And by the way, Stephen is no longer my partner. I asked management to do that, and they'd gone along with it. Now I have a partner who's not considered for the girls. He's a model family man. That's what I'm going to be. As soon as you say yes, what can I tell you? Naturally, I say I want to be your wife," the girl said happily. And at the same moment she found herself in the arms of a man. Christopher tenderly kissed the young woman and quietly in her ear said, "You have now made me with the happiest person. I love you madly, and I will never hurt you or Anya. I will do everything possible so that you do not need anything. We will be a model family. And now you can't refuse to meet your relatives, who already know about you and are eagerly waiting for me to introduce you to them. I understand that you are preparing me to talk to my father and mother about the wonderful northern region, as well as hinting that we will have a joint trip to those lands. That's a good point. And you are not only beautiful, but also smart." Laughing, Christopher replied, and kissed the young woman on the lips.
Subscribe and click the bell.
The rain was hitting the windshield with such fierceness that Franklin involuntarily flinched at each blow. It was so good that it would break the glass. Not a cheerful picture of natural madness was supplemented by the inner tension that had been accumulating for 3 months. The man desperately wanted to get rid of stress, but he did not know what in this situation would have the greatest effect: a large portion of strong drink or escape to some secluded place. His intuition told him the right thing to do. "Franklin, while you're looking for that place, you're gonna lose your mind. That's why it's a good time to get drunk as hell. There's a reason scientists say that many geniuses have brilliant thoughts when they're in a bad state of mind." The head of Franklin Cosmetics is used to listening to his inner voice, trying to pay less attention to the heavenly flood. He started the car and drove out of the parking lot. And for the second one, I was satisfied with the decision. In this weather, Phil only drink vodka. The man grinned sadly at his house and muttered, "And the occasion was perfect. Or rather to say, you can't think of a worse one." Franklin thought for the first time today that fate was mocking him. One setback after another, and he had no time to dodge the blows. The thought flashed through my mind again. It's as if someone had put a curse on me on purpose. The man immediately pushed the thought away, because he did not believe in Moldavian nonsense, but he could not explain the succession of business failures either. There was no one to consult on this issue either. Therefore, the businessman decided that there was nothing better than to get drunk. In general, of course, there were at first thoughts that it was all grandmother. The first wives about her said all sorts of things. But then he found out that she was dead and scolded himself. How can you believe in all kinds of damn things? Well, it's something else. It's more like a streak that's gone on too long. It's got to end sometime. That's usually the way it goes. Franklin had never abused hard liquor, but he knew that it helped to clear his brain of unnecessary junk. He moved slowly down the street, trying to make out familiar landmarks through the veil of rain. Finally, the sign of a beer bar with the promising name Jolly Carp appeared in his field of vision. The logo of this party establishment contained not only letters, but also the image of a huge fish with a beaming smile. When Frank first graced the election with his presence, he asked the receptionist whether those who had come up with such a stunning advertisement with the fish must have taken a hefty dose themselves. Baffled by the receptionists, asked the client, "What made you think that?" Franklin blurted it out without thinking about the consequences. Yes, because a sober person is unlikely to come up with the idea of depicting fish of obscure breeds with a smile on his face. Long-haired man looked resentfully at the status visitor and corrected the snout of fish is not a muzzle, but snouts. That's what biologists have decided to call that part. Franklin did not like to be corrected. He immediately decided to flaunt his knowledge and their theologians. If you dig that deep, these are the people who study fish. The manager couldn't object because it wasn't in his interest to scare away customers. After that incident, Franklin had several more times visited the bar, which, by the way, served very good quality beer. Today he decided to come here for an hour. The parking lot was about 100 meters from the bar, and the man had to cover this distance in the pouring rain because he forgot to take an umbrella and his suit was soaked through in less than a minute. Franklin, out of habit, raised his eyes upward to capture his reverence for the owner of the establishment. "Hello to you and your tassel, Mr. Karras." But the always cheerful fish this time greeted him with a sinister smile. Frank, by her own mustache, and quickly averted his gaze. "I definitely need to get very drunk, or I'll bite everyone." He went down the stairs, where he was greeted with a knowing smile by the familiar receptionist. "Mr. Franklin, what an unexpected surprise, Sam." That's what all the visitors called the receptionist, started fussing over a customer. This customer, of course, was not the best in terms of character, but he always gave good tips. Sam was ready to turn himself inside out for money. Money doesn't smell at all. It doesn't matter how it comes, as long as it's there. And he can smile once in a while, bend a little, speak a little, in a way that pleases the client. "Yes, you're soaked to the skin. Give me your jacket. We'll have it dry in no time." Frank threw off the top of his suit. "Thank you, Sam. It's always a pleasure to come in this weather. You feel right at home here." Snatched by the praise, the receptionist withdrew, but reappeared a couple minutes later. He was about to offer the regulars a couple of new items on the menu. But Franklin made an emphatic hand gesture. "Sam, I'm not in the mood for a tasting tonight. I'm ready to tear everyone apart, so I'd better take a classic rough to restore my composure. The manager's out of town, and I hear you. I'll send a waiter right over." Followed by the same careless gesture. "I don't want to make a fuss. Be a friend. You bring the double portion yourself. Of course, if such a favor is not burdensome for you." The administrator turned off her eyes and became at this moment very similar to the carp pictured above the entrance. "No, it is not difficult for me, even pleasant, to fulfill the request of our regular customer. But you, Mr. Franklin, as I noticed, are driving." Frank clapped the man on the shoulder. "So you're still turning out your boy, keeping tabs on the customers. That's commendable. But you don't have to worry about me, Sam, because I never drive drunk. If I'm completely wasted, you can call me a cab." "Sam, a full-chested drink up front. Of course, Mr. Franklin, whatever you want." The receptionist disappeared again behind the partition separating the kitchen block from the lounge, and soon returned with a tray on which he majestically gave a glass of almost liter containers. With a solemn look, the maitre d' pronounced our specialty, straight from the fridge, clammed up in his eyes. Franklin took one big sip. It tasted amazing. The receptionist departed with a smile. Franklin took another pithy sip. He sat for a few minutes, covering his eyes and enjoying the pleasant book that was quickly flowing down his body. The men physically felt the anxiety loosen its grip. The realization became clearer with each passing second. Someone unseen within him distinctly said to Franklin, "Perhaps the causes of your troubles are in your surroundings. You've forgotten that even the people closest to you can set you up. In the last few years, you've become very self-confident in general, and that's extremely dangerous for business. Franklin concentrated on that inner voice and didn't notice a local man with a hint of baldness approaching his table. Permission. Frank snapped out of a pleasant state of weightlessness and involuntarily looked at the stranger. "Excuse me, what did you say?" The stout man didn't even look embarrassed. "I thought you wouldn't mind if I landed at your table. It's so bad out, and it's dry and quiet in here." Franklin wanted to tell the impertinent man that the room was full of empty tables, but he beat him to it. "I noticed you right away, Mr. Franklin. You sat with such an expression on your face, as if you were sent into space without your consent. And you've decided to become a crewman, too." "Not exactly. I didn't just want to give you a little backup." The man accepted a mug of beer from the waiter, then carefully wiped his hands with a napkin. Only then did he properly introduce himself as Ethan the lawyer. Franklin shook the outstretched hand, but did not answer anything. Ethan took this silence as a sign of approval and continued. "Actually, I'm a corporate lawyer, and I could be useful to you." Franklin looked into the smug face of his interlocutor. How much Ethan, and committed his glass, and took up his napkin again. "I think we can agree on a price." Franklin was beginning to be annoyed by this unknown lawyer. "Ethan, tell me honestly, who sent you? You don't think I'm naive enough to believe the fairy tale that you just happened to be in this bar? It's in this kind of bad weather." Ethan nasty, hey. "You should be an investigator, not the CEO of a cosmetics company. You scanned me right through. I can't get away with it now. But you're right. I won't deny that I'm here for a reason. The fact is, your wife Maria asked me to help. I've had time to study your problem, and I want to tell you that." Franklin abruptly cut the lawyer off. "For a handsome fee, I can weave my way out of anything. Ethan, I'm not new in business, and I understand perfectly well that my situation has practically no positive way out." The lawyers got it on the table. "But hope dies last. And if Mr. Ethan, I will not throw away money on a hopeless venture, especially the company is currently stuck on the shoals." But Frank the businessman stood up, making it clear that the conversation was over. "If I need your help, I will definitely find you. All the best to you." Franklin passed by, pulled him into a string by the receptionist, forgetting to tip him. The businessman was again overwhelmed with the most negative emotions. Already on the way out, he remembered about his jacket and returned to the hall. Sam silently handed him the items of clothing and received for the obliging money bonus. The maitre d' bowed, and with the practiced movement of a magician, slipped the bill into his pocket. "Mr. Franklin, would you like to call a cab?" Franklin grumbled grudgingly. "No need. I'll get there in my car." Sam said nothing and glanced at the table where the glass was almost full. The cosmetics firm owner's casual companion had also disappeared unnoticed, leaving a few small banknotes on the table. The celestial bacchanalia was gradually decreasing, and only small rains were monotonously pounding on the sidewalk. Franklin's mood continued to sour, and he was no longer trying to restrain himself. When Kevin ran out into the hallway and threw himself on his neck, he released himself from his son's embrace rather roughly. "Kevin, you almost knocked me over. See, Daddy's tired." The 8-year-old grudgingly muttered, "Dad, you need to go to the hospital and have the doctor check you out. You're always angry and tired. I wanted to have a serious talk with you." The man tried to correct his mistake. "Son, we'll definitely talk, but only a little later. Where's Mom?" Kevin waved his hand toward the kitchen without words and lowered his head, which meant an extreme degree of resentment. He wandered into the nursery. The head of the family walked in the direction indicated, and the tension reached the maximum mark. At the moment when Maria said with a smile, "You are so early today, and I'm still with dinner," there was nothing provocative in the woman's tone. But Franklin got angry all, how nice we say it, like a caring bird. "Only your concern for Maria is getting on my nerves. Why did you send that idiot to me?" Tears glistened in the woman's eyes, but her voice didn't waver. "Why did you attack me from the doorstep? Explain things to me like a human being. What happened?" The wife's calmness added another spoonful of oil to the fire of the family scandal. Don't play the innocent. Why did you send that stupid lawyer to me? Marina adopted a defensive posture. The noisemaker in her hand looked like a symbol of feminine determination. If you haven't forgotten, dear, I also work in the company you head, so I have every right to make decisions to save our common child. The man even jumped in the seat of our common. I heard you. Since when did Franklin Cosmetics become your property? Such a violent reaction of the woman clearly did not expect. She started gulping for air. But I'm your wife, so I have the right. Franklin cut her off halfway through. That doesn't mean anything. I have to tell you that your status gives you absolutely no benefit. You're nothing, and I'm nothing. And I'm the only one who can make decisions. Of course, as a board member, you can make suggestions, but you realize it's a conditional structure because I make the final decision. We took our frustrations out on the wife. Franklin has already calmly said, and from now on, I'm going to ask you very nicely. Don't poke your nose where you're not wanted. It was said so harshly that Maria could no longer hold back her tears. She cried and shouted, "All right. I won't say another word. But I want to remind you, Franklin, that once, as you believe, your company was saved precisely because of my intervention. Too bad you have such a short memory." Franklin had never seen Maria in such a lost state. Some distant string twitched in his heart, and he approached his wife, trying to embrace her. But the muzzle pushed him away. "Don't touch me. You think only of yourself and your ambition. Don't you care for the rest of us? I've been told how ugly you were to Lucy by your first wife. I was naive, believing only your stories. I thought it was all people talking about you out of jealousy. Now I realize it was you who was the stumbling block." Franklin listened to his wife, but could say nothing against her. Because in her desperate monologue, he heard the answer to the question that had long tormented him. What was the reason for his chronic failures? Meanwhile, the woman continued, but more calmly. "You, Franklin, are used to command, but the responsibility is always shifted to someone else's shoulders. That's what happened when you got involved with the crooks last year, who supplied us with a substandard substance, and the whole batch went bad. In case you've forgotten, that was a multi-million-dollar loss. It would seem that a sensible person should draw conclusions after such a serious mistake. But you jumped into a new adventure. You never think about anyone but yourself. You don't care about the people on the street. If the company goes under the hammer, Frank will clench his fists and growl. I'm sure we'll pay up. We just have to come up with something workable, but unconventional." The woman glared angrily. "You sit there and think, and I'll wash my hands of it. In fact, I'm convinced that this time the company will not be able to swim out. Sorry, my dear husband, but I really look at the current situation and see that your firm is going down. Only a miracle can save it. That's the reason I turned to Ethan. But since you don't like my intervention, I haven't lifted a finger." Marina, with her head held high, headed for the exit for a second, stopped at the door, and "Don't you dare yell at me ever again." "Man," heard the wife deliberately loudly called her son and ordered him, "Kevin, get ready to go to Grandma's house for a visit. Daddy needs to get some rest and get his nerves in order." Soon the front door slammed, and he was left alone with his unhappy thoughts. Quarrels with his wife had happened before, but in the last year and a half they had become more frequent, which annoyed Franklin greatly. The same situation was in the last years of his previous marriage, so he could not understand what women wanted from him and why they are always dissatisfied with everything. Pondering over this problem, the man made himself an omelet and ate dinner without appetite. He thought that Maria had become too bold, and it was time for her to be restrained. And then Lucy, his first wife, came to mind again, because he had decided to do the same procedure with her. But always docile. Women catch his every word. Suddenly, she disagreed. Clearly, Franklin could not forgive her for such an act of defiance. The recollection brought back unpleasant thoughts. Franklin threw the plate into the sink with irritation. He wanted to find solace near the television, but the image of his first wife made it impossible to concentrate on the plot of a thrilling action movie. What the hell is this? I think it's a bad omen. Damn stress. The man again went to the kitchen and poured himself a full shot of vodka. Anxious visions immediately disappeared, and Franklin, to consolidate the effect, poured another half shot of hot liquid spilled over the faithful. And he, as recently in the bar, felt incredible lightness. Folk remedies are better than pills. Franklin said this optimistically and put the mortgage bottle back in the refrigerator. He went back to the television and began clicking the remote control buttons without the same irritation. The booze had weakened his body so much that Franklin didn't notice that he had fallen asleep. All night he dreamed. Lucy. But this night vision caused nostalgia because irrevocably lost to him time when he was really happy. Insistent alarm clock signals forced Franklin to open his eyes to those feelings that he again experienced in the dream. Did not leave the man, and all day long he suddenly irresistibly wanted to talk to his father, and he even intuitively reached for the phone, but immediately pulled his hand away from the device. What is this obsession? I'm definitely not myself. After all, Dad died 3 years ago. Carl was widowed early and raised his only son by himself. He was a renowned scientist in plant genetics. But despite his high status, he preferred simplicity and modesty in everyday life. He also tried to instill in his son an ascetic lifestyle. Franklin, remember that domestic comfort and other excesses make a person addicted. Up to a time, the guy accepted these rules and even tried to imitate his father. But in adolescence, everything changed, and he reminded his father every chance he got. Dad, I do not want to deliberately deprive myself of an interesting life. Small pleasures don't spoil a man. How do you say? They add to his existence, and I don't want to deny myself that. Carl tried to change his son's mind for a while, but then he gave up. He didn't have the time to indoctrinate his little boy with life-tested truths. After all, the elder Franklin combined scientific activity and teaching his favorite subject. The professor was often invited to the educational institutions of neighboring countries to give lectures, and he almost never refused such events. Franklin many times tried to remind his father that such a strenuous rhythm of work is dangerous to his health, to which Carl philosophically answered his son, "My life itself is dangerous, so I see no point in limiting myself, because what is destined to happen cannot be avoided anyway." That's how son and father lived, trying to stay out of each other's way. But everything changed with the arrival of Lucy. At one of his visiting lectures, Carl met a student who amazed him with her broad knowledge of biology. Emotions were bursting out of the professor's soul, as there was no one but his son in the house. He shared his joy with him. "Franklin, I never imagined that our land gives birth to such bright talents. You know, the other day I was giving a lecture at the academy and had the good fortune to meet an amazing girl. Imagine, she had me, a professor, under her belt in every sense of the word." Franklin asked for the sake of propriety, "Who's the girl?" Carl came to life. At first glance, a girl of what 1,000. She came from a small district center. Since childhood, she's been interested in floriculture. She entered the biotechnology department at the academy on the dictates of her heart. After graduation, she's going to go into agribusiness. Franklin could not hide his surprise for a girl, of course, an unusual hobby. "But father, you yourself know very well that in youth everyone makes grandiose plans." And then the professor interrupted his son unequal all by himself. "You're lazy. I've already come to terms with it. That girl has a fountain of ideas spilling out of her." Amazing ideas. The father's delight was a painful blow to Franklin's ego. The son barely managed to interrupt the flow of his father's eloquence. "Dad, stop. You know how first impressions are often deceptive." The professor waved his hands. "No, son, my gut has never failed me yet. This girl definitely has a business sense. It just needs to be channeled into a fruitful direction. Father, you've intrigued me enough to make me want to meet this new Eliza Doolittle." Carl froze, but his confusion lasted only a few seconds. "You shouldn't say that, Franklin. You're not Henry Higgins to play the aristocrat either." "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't choose the right example. But I really want to meet this girl. You described her so vividly, the elder Franklin. I was flattered by the praise and agreed right away. All right, I'll arrange for you to meet her. But Franklin, I'm warning you, no more of that Franklin stuff. Franklin crossed his arms over his chest. Father, I swear I'll behave like a true gentleman. At that time, Franklin could not have thought that meeting a pretty provincial girl would change his life dramatically, although the girl could not be called a beauty. But the charm in her was in excess. From Lucy emanated so much energy that once Franklin jokingly said, "Lucy, you can connect to charge phones and other electronics." The girl grinned. You're not alone in that observation. When I was very young, my grandfather used to tell his fellow villagers that I was a battery-powered robot. Your grandfather has a great sense of humor. Franklin, you wouldn't believe it, but they believed him. But the locals interpreted the joke in their own way. They spread rumors that Herb's granddaughter's heart wasn't real, but a motor. Everyone felt sorry for me and gave me candy. I wish Grandpa was gone, but we often go to the village, so Grandpa's house is not empty. Franklin found this story funny. I've never been to the village. Are there really such naive people there? No, they're just ordinary people. And the craving for rumors is an indispensable element that saves you from boredom. Just a few days with Lucy didn't go unnoticed by Franklin. After all, in addition to positive energy, the favorite of the professor distinguished herself and a sharp mind. One day the girl confessed to him, "Franklin, if I had a different amount of money, I would open a cosmetics company." The guy was surprised, "But you don't know anything about it." Lucy laughed. "I am profoundly mistaken, because at the heart of every cream, elk, or shampoo, plant extract, by the way, is a profitable direction, because half of humanity is women." The young man immediately caught on to the idea. "Lucy, there's something in what you say." Franklin could not find the right word for a long time, but he spit on this trifle and moved on to the next point. "By the way, many men are also not strangers to the pursuit of beauty. Personally, I'm very interested in your idea. Tell me, what would you call your company? After all, it is an essential part of the brand." Lucy grinned with geniality. "Look how promising Franklin Cosmetics or Franklin Youth sounds. That's just me thinking off the top of my head. It's the first thing that came to mind." Franklin's already pictured himself in a future presentation. This picture inspired him so much that he took the girl in his arms and danced with her. "Lucy, you, my fairy, are a true enchantress." The irrepressible joy of the young man was explained by the fact that he still could not find his place in the sun. After graduating from the Institute of Chemistry and Technology, the professor's son worked only a year in his specialty. Franklin did not want to work for the state from the beginning. 2 attempts to start his own business ended in complete failure. Meeting Lucy breathed new hope into him, and he decided to keep the girl to himself for a higher purpose. He proposed to her. Although Lucy understood perfectly well that the young man does not have tender feelings for her, she agreed to become his wife. Their union turned out to be successful both in life and in business. But the period of prosperity lasted until Franklin one day did not meet Maria. Lucy was losing badly in appearance against the background of a sophisticated rival who had perfect body shapes. In fact, Franklin's main irritating factor was his wife's fullness. Lucy, and before marriage, was not thin. And after the birth of a daughter, Cindy, and even kinder, Franklin humiliated his wife in every possible way, did not hesitate to compare her to a famous animal. One insatiable fall day, a loving husband told Lucy, "I can no longer live with you, because I met a woman with whom it is not a shame to appear in decent society." This confession was unexpected for the young woman, and she did not even immediately realize what had happened. "Franklin, that was a bad joke. I could be offended." My husband sarcastically remarked, "I don't give a damn about your resentments for a long time. You're making a fool of yourself. A village in a word. Let's not get into details. Let's just go our separate ways." "But I can't, and I don't want to. I put everything into this company." "Franklin," you laughed. "Yes, it's my credit and my money. If it weren't for me, Your worthless ideas would be lost for lack of demand. Franklin had a lot of nasty things to say to his wife. He concluded his speech by asking her to clean up the place as soon as possible. Now the man was horrified to think of the act, and he burst out involuntarily. "Yeah, buddy, you were a scumbag. How else can you call a man who threw his wife and little daughter out the door?" It didn't surprise him that it was the first time he'd thought of his daughter in 10 years. More than anything else, the businessman was concerned about the fact that March, for whose sake he threw out his first wife, today supported not him and the former rival. Men quietly said yes. Female solidarity is a great power. After a moment's thought, he threw a question into the void. "I wonder where Lucy is now." "Probably somewhere in the countryside, scrounging for food." Frank was not wrong about one thing. His first wife had indeed settled in a small Belarusian village. True, she did not study, as Franklin thought, but lived and worked there for her own pleasure. That morning at summer sunset, Lucy was going to cook oatmeal porridge for 2 people according to tradition, but found that there was no beggar's molasses of salt in the house. Cindy sat at the table waiting for breakfast, but realized from the confused expression on her mother's face that the morning meal had been postponed until later in the day. The girl tossed her spoon with irritation. "Mom, are we out of something again?" The woman smiled at her daughter. "You guessed it. And that this time salt, sugar, milk, cereal." Cindy listed gastronomic nominations and did not even try to hide her displeasure. Lucy became guilty. "No salt. It was there yesterday, but today it's gone. I've been distracted lately." Cindy had a caustic remark. "The mice must have eaten all the salt. They love salt. They just can't live without it." The girl stood up abruptly from the table, and the table toppled to the floor with a clatter. Lucy shuddered. "Cindy, would you mind holding your grudge? It's no big deal. It's a 2-minute walk to the store. You run and get the salt, and we're together." The 15-year-old selfishly curled his lips in disdain. "Why me, Mom? Is that your fault? It's up to you to fix it. Everyone's used to it." "Cindy, run over there. Cindy, bring it." Her daughter accompanied her private speech with facial expressions and gestures that gave her mother a fit of laughter. "My girl, that's the way it is. You're the youngest in the family, and you're the one who has to run these errands." Cindy almost screamed. "I don't want to be the errand girl. Maybe I have plans of my own." The girl's voice became a little bit more serious. Lucy peacefully said, "Okay, if it's so difficult for you to run to the village shop, I'll go myself. And there's no need to get hysterical over such a trifle." Cindy snapped at her. "Mommy, it's not because of me, but because of your fault that all the fuss has broken out. Any normal housewife knows which products she has in the house and which ones are running out." And you mother laughingly interrupted her daughter. "Even if it is not a normal hostess, but it is also here is not a stranger. You could have followed the food supplies, seeing that your mother is closing. I have so much to do. I don't have time to breathe." Cindy remained silent, stepping her eyebrows together. Lucy decided that this was a good time to do some parenting. "I don't like you talking all day long. You could help me at least once in a while. I don't demand much from you." The girl grimaced again, interrupted her mother. "No, Mommy, you can't lure me into that trap. Not your plantation. That's where it stands." Cindy ran her hand over her throat, and for added effect, he flicked his tongue. "And I'm not going to follow your example, Mom. This means that our family succession is impossible. So this option is completely off the table." The woman looked at her daughter fondly. "Do you look like a wet Borgia now?" Cindy flashed his eyes angrily. "Thank you for not comparing me to a worm or a frog, but you can say whatever you want, and I still won't change my attitude to your business." The girl made quotation marks with her fingers and headed for the entrance. But her mother caught her by the arm. "My daughter, you can change your plans 100 times, if you have any. I'm not going to force you. But as a mother, I have a right to know what your plans are. Admit it. Where do you want to put your energy?" The girl rounded her eyes in beautiful, spreading her arms as if she wanted to cover the whole universe. Mom, I dream of becoming a model. After all, you will not deny that for this I have all the data and face and figure. Cindy threw her mother a glance, but Lucy answered the Harris in an admonishing tone. Besides what you named, it's also good to have a brain in your head. The professional life of models is very short, 10 years at most, and then there's no 100% guarantee you'll get selected. There are plenty of pretty girls out there. That's why there's so much competition in the modeling business. Apparently, Cindy was puzzled by her mother's warning. She thought for about a minute and then said cheerfully, "Bullshit. If I don't sneak into modeling, I'm going to go into acting. Even the teachers at school tell me that with my looks I'll be able to be on stage or on the catwalk." Lucy sighed heavily. "You've got your head full of nonsense." The girl exclaimed, "Mom, but you do not want me to spend my life stuck in this village. What's wrong with our village? Everything. Everything here is stupid, and the people are stupid and dull. If you knew what they were saying about you, you would have run away from here a long time ago." Lucy grinned. "I know my bones are always going through the motions, but I haven't paid attention to it in a long time. And about the Cindy people, I want to tell you that you still have to grow and grow to reach their level. And don't use that kind of language in front of me." A blush broke out on the girl's cheeks, and she breathed heavily. Lucy decided to further exasperate her daughter. "What are you flaring your nostrils like a pack mare? You don't like criticism. Get used to it. You'll meet other things in life." Cindy was all, "Get it, get it, get it, get it, get it, get it. How annoying is that?" And out the door, Lucy put her daughter's overturned table in its place and sank down tiredly on it, all in her father, as powerful and self-assured. The woman very rarely remembered her husband, who had practically kicked her out of the house along with her young daughter. But lately, Cindy had so often demonstrated not the best sides of her character that the comparison of her with her father came off her tongue. Maybe she'll grow out of it. After all, I too was desperate at that age, arguing with my parents and grandfather. And then he settled down. Although my life can hardly serve as an example, and I do not wish my daughter such a fate. This short monologue helped to put my nerves in order. The woman once again, for some reason, looked in the cupboard where the spices were stored. "I'll have to go for salt myself. I'll go to the plot after lunch, when the heat dies down a little." Despite the tangible approach of fall, the last days of August were tropical heat, so Lucy added to her modest closet stylish hats with huge brim. She barely glanced in the mirror and half-heartedly characterized her outfit. Of course, a dress and a hat was not a good combination. Yes, for a trip to the village shop, this outfit would do. The woman took her straw bag, with which she always went to the store, and headed in the direction of the outlet. But she had to show up on the main street, and there were only 5 streets in the parade. How did it become noticeably lively in the yards along the main thoroughfare of the village? The first florist noticed Grandmother Helen, who swarmed on her plot near the fence. The elderly woman immediately childishly broke her back and ran up to the gate. "Oh, Lucy, I didn't recognize you at first. I wondered what kind of a hottie in a hat was here. And it turns out to be you." Lucy politely said hello to the old woman and continued on her way. But it wasn't so easy to get rid of Grandma Lena. This woman smelled the scent of sensation from a mile away. And now she also galloped after Lucy. "Lucy, where are you running to?" The woman stopped. "Helen, to the store in a hurry." Granny perked up. "Wait, I'll walk you to the corner. I've got something I need to find out. I've been wanting to consult with you for a long time. I haven't had the chance. I'm listening. Don't worry about it. I won't keep you long. I wanted to ask you something. You're the only scientist in the village. You graduated from the academy, so you know about herbs." In the parade, it was customary to start an important conversation with an approach. Bavalina's introductory part turned out to be too long, and Lucy did not hide her impatience. "Helen, healing herbs and flowers. They're a little different concepts, but I will gladly help you if it is in my power, what you wanted to ask me? Yes. I'm interested in those ethics that you breed. Tell me, is it true that they help with coughs to get rid of annoying Granny? Farmer said lavender is useful for many diseases. But about this, you'd better ask our doctors. I only know that to treat bronchitis, take the roots, and they prepare them in a special way. How? Don't you know? Although Lucy knew several recipes for lavender-based remedies, she didn't want to talk to Helen's grandmother anymore. Helen, I'm not a doctor. The old woman's eyes shot several key lightning bolts in her direction, but Lucy ignored the old woman's displeasure and hurried toward the store, which already showed itself at the end of the street. Sorry, Helen, I really don't have time. She was being followed. Look, what a proud farmer she is. How long has it been since Elia was transferred? I remember when you were barefoot in the village with the boys. You must have forgotten how you destroyed the roof of my barn. The village troublemaker didn't stop listing Lucy's past sins, and when she got to the store, at the same time she recalled all the offenses she had suffered from the family bunny, with whom in the old days Helen had been friends or enemies. The elderly scandalized woman was so engrossed in her denunciation that she did not immediately notice her waddling towards the store. Stephen was formerly a farm manager, and after his retirement, he decided to take up community work. He took to his duties immediately. Helen, what are you doing out here? Screaming in a bad voice, scaring people. Granny put her foot forward. And who are you that I have to answer to you? Stephen proudly puffed out his chest, like a village chief. I have the right to know. Granny stomped her feet in huge galoshes. Who elected you? He appointed himself headman. And you're making demands. You'd better tell people how you go to the farm at night. How many bags of mixed fodder have you stolen? To put up with such insolence, even from a former lover. In his mature years, Stephen, often dropped by the lonely milkmaid village headman, could not, despite the literacy, which was the result of an old injury. The man also took the appropriate look and even tried to step on the opponent. Helen, I won't look that you're a woman on crutches. You've got that way with your spoons on blood everything. The offended grandmother agreed to the whole street. Good people, what's going on? The headman is threatening me. At the exhausted screams of the old woman, Wendy, the sales clerk, jumped out of the store. The mere sight of this dimensional lady sent shivers down the spine of the exuberant shoppers. The saleswoman looked angrily first at Helen. Then she said, Hey, you old robbers, settle down nicely. Otherwise, I will be forced to take harsh measures against you. The arguers instantly quieted down, because they knew that Wendy did not throw words into the wind. Helen whispered something under her breath and headed towards her house, while Stephen sat down on a bench outside the store. Wendy returned to her workplace and to the questioning looks of several customers. She said, Yes, they're at it again, Helen. They're all in a tizzy. They're fighting like little children. I can't even believe that people of such an age can have battles. You never know, Lucy said thoughtfully to Wendy, but it's true. Not without reason they say that old people fall into childhood. It is a natural phenomenon. A person is born, grows up, reaches the peak of his development. And then the reverse process begins. The saleswoman pressed her lips together. You know best. You're a scientist. There's one thing I don't understand. What are you studying in this dump? What the hell do you need a flower plantation for? If I were you, would I have moved closer to the capital or left the USA long ago? You have a lot of money. What's keeping you in our village? Lucy shrugged her shoulders and smiled stupidly at Wendy. Surprisingly, that's the second time this morning I've been asked that question. I myself can't figure out what keeps me here. The land, I guess. The woman paid for her purchase and headed for the exit. But on the street, she suddenly remembered that she had forgotten the salt. Wendy looked at the returning customer with understanding and how she had forgotten to buy salt. Lucy looked at the retailer with surprise. Wendy, can you read minds? With you that not only start guessing thoughts from behind the cuckoo. Soon, we'll have to do telepathy and magic. He'll wake up by tonight and come back here. They're gonna ask for a promissory note, and I'll have to listen to their hangover ravings. The women in line began to express sympathy for Wendy, and Lucy stuffed the packet of salt into her bag and headed home with a sense of accomplishment. To avoid running into Helen's grandmother again, Lucy took a roundabout way back. All the way she thought about Wendy's words, and after a short consideration came to the conclusion that there was a special charm in country life. Perhaps it was this very fact that was the invisible magnet that attracted and would not let go of the heart. Merlot, Cindy said something to herself as she fiddled with the stove. Lucy asked in surprise, "You're on the run." Without turning around, she replied cheerfully, "I changed my mind. You could say that your words had an effect on me. I was so ashamed that I immediately decided to correct myself. One more minute, and our book will be ready." Cindy Shorter had a big spoonful of brew in the pot. Lucy walked into the kitchen. "You decided to diet porridge to boil without salt. Why without poison was necessary in product?" Betty did. "Why did she show up at the end of summer?" The woman's voice trembled. And Cindy was finally distracted from cooking. But the girl forgot about the friend who'd lent her the salt because she was startled by the sight of her mother. She clapped her hands. "Mom, did you dress like that and paraded around the village?" "Yeah. What's wrong with it?" "Well, it's a killer outfit. The dress is in style. Not alone. I used to do it in the field. And a fancy hat. Betty's dad's here too, by the way. I can imagine his eyes would roll if he saw you in that outfit." Lucy shouted with annoyance at her daughter Cindy, "Stop criticizing your mother. Did you also walk around the village dressed in such a way that I am sometimes ashamed of you? How many times have I told you not to wear those shitty pants? You have a closet full of clothes. You could pick something decent, and you shouldn't believe it. Lavender is not a demanding crop, and it feels very comfortable on our soils. With the right technique, you can achieve a profitability of 200%. Andrew was not impressed by these statistics, and he stubbornly said, "I don't believe it." Herbert shouted at his son, "What have you got?" "I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Let the girl try. Maybe she'll do something good. Besides, there's a lot of land here that we don't own. The authorities will be glad to have someone to take care of their culture." But Andrew didn't give up. "But you need seed money to start a business. And as far as I'm concerned, Franklin's got you pantless. Miranda mumbles it's a good thing he let us out alive. Yeah, he gave me my stuff. And we'll help with the money with Grandpa. We have some savings for a rainy day." Lucy decided to start her own business with a small plot of land. Only the question of marketing the aromatic products remained unsolved. But her childhood friend Alex helped her. Fate brought them together in childhood, when their parents took them to the village on vacation. Although Alex was older than Lucy by 4 years, the age difference did not interfere with their friendship. In the years of youth, the guy helped the girl out many times, and she always tried to look up to him. It was Alex who infected her with the idea of entering the agricultural academy. He himself also graduated from this educational institution with a red diploma and almost immediately settled firmly in the capital. Lucy kept in touch with her friend and knew that he held a high position in the ministry. After a short hesitation, she decided to remind her old friend about herself. Alex was glad to receive Lucy's call. "How great that you called. At the first opportunity I rushed over, so wait, don't move anywhere." Alex showed up in a parade literally on the 3rd day after the call. "Lucy, you have no idea how excited I am. Tell me about your life in the capital. I hear you're married to a serious woman." Bitterly smirked, turned around and curled up. "I have no husband, no company. All my efforts have failed. You know, Alex, it hurts so much to realize that the person you trusted infinitely just used you." Lucy spoke briefly about her failed family life and noticed that he was looking at her strangely. A hunch struck the woman. "Alex, do you have problems in your family too?" The man looked away. "Sort of, but I try not to dwell on it. Especially now, I don't want to spoil the mood. Better tell me, what are you going to do next?" After hearing about her friend's plans, the man began to actively support her. Lucy, you are thinking right and have chosen what is now very necessary for enterprising people. We have the best time in our country nowadays, and it is possible to take a loan for business development. And with the marketing of products, we will definitely think of something. Can you trust me to solve this issue? A week later, Alex called and said that there is an opportunity to conclude an agreement with a well-known cosmetics company. The firm is very dear to its reputation, so cooperation with it will open the green light for you. But you must understand that you will have to undergo a number of laboratory tests. Lucy was ready for any tests. She was happy that things were moving in a positive direction. But suddenly there was another beneficiary, retired Colonel Beekeeper. When the plantation's lavender bloomed. The next year, Benjamin set up his hives nearby, and he didn't even warn the owner of the plot about it. Benjamin became the culprit of the first troubles of the novice flower farmer. That summer morning, Lucy did not know what awaited her on the plot, which she cared for as a living being. Together with her daughter, she went to the plantation early in the morning to assess the blooming activity. She and Cindy had no sooner reached their destination than they were attacked by bees already stiffening their brains and bodies. It was only her daughter's screams that made the woman take the right action as calmly as possible. The girl jumped out into the hallway and started fidgeting in front of the mirror. Normal pants and holes are the most fashionable trend. Lucy glanced at the wall clock. Cindy, you've been giving me head since this morning for almost 10, and I haven't done anything yet. Let's have breakfast. Let me do the handouts today, and you do the squats. Mommy, get some rest. Maybe we can go to Betty's tonight. The girl deftly distributed the porridge on party plates and herself sat down opposite her mother. Lucy could tell from her burning eyes that the girl was up to something. And this hint of Alex's arrival was not accidental. Cindy thought that she and her former childhood friend had a secret affair, but their relationship was strictly business. Lucy started the porridge, reminding Cindy of her daughter. I don't have time to come by tonight to pick up the raw materials, and I haven't looked in the sushi tree yet today. If you have any more questions for me, tell me as soon as possible. Cindy took a long look at her mother, and Lucy saw something in her eyes that she had not noticed before. Softer now, she said, why don't you say something? My cub. The girl began to rub the edge of the tablecloth. What was a sign of great excitement. Mom, you just don't take offense at me, but I've been meaning to ask you about Dad for a long time. Betty has such a great dad. You're all I have. I was just a little girl, and I don't remember much of that other life. Cindy looked away, as if she were afraid her mother would read in her eyes what she was trying to hide from her. But Lucy said quite calmly, I don't want to remember that man. He has ceased to exist for me. Mom, he's my father. Doesn't he want to see me? I can't tell you that. But judging by the fact that he's never called or written in 10 years, he's not interested in your fate. Cindy looked her mother in the eye again. Mom, maybe he just doesn't know where you took me. The woman drew her daughter close to her. He knows everything. I even sent him a picture of you, but he didn't reply. That's it. Let's not bring it up again. Aren't we living well together? Lucy tried to sound cheerful, but her voice was sad. Cindy, I'm going to be a teacher. And you wash the dishes and put the house in order. The daughter answered nothing, and the mother realized that she was under the impression of talking about her father. But the woman knew very well that one day the time would come, and she would have to tell her daughter everything. And that hour had come. The old heart wounds reminded themselves again, and the thought flashed through her mind that no matter how many times she chased away the past, it would still be knocking at the door. Lucy checked until late in the evening, ready to send to the customer raw materials, all the while reminiscing about her failed marriage. When Lucy informed her immediate family that she was marrying the son of a Moscow professor, her mother and father were shocked. But her grandparents rejoiced at the news like children. Miranda, despite her granddaughter's warning, spread the news all over the neighborhood. Herbert later reprimanded his wife. What is it with you and getting ahead of yourself? And if the wedding is upset, what will you say then? Miranda felt guilty, though. She decided to argue with her husband. If you keep your mouth shut, then nothing will happen. Got into the habit of predicting things ahead. I'm just not in the habit of jumping to conclusions. You know what they say, don't say shit before you jump. And you, Miranda, you're getting ahead of yourself. Do you know what our tongues are like? And you can't share with anyone here. What's Helen's grandmother? After a stern reprimand from her husband, Miranda shut her mouth. But it was too late. Her granddaughter's wedding was coming up. The whole neighborhood knew them. When Lucy dropped by the old folks' house for the day, she was harassed by the local women. Tell me, how did you manage to land a fiancé from the capital? You don't seem to be anything special. How did you get the other neighbors? I was only interested in the material part. Lucy, he's rich. That wife is in shock. The girl didn't answer such questions because she knew that every word she said would be turned upside down. There was another reason that kept her silent: fear of the evil eye. Such fears. She had been indoctrinated as a child by her grandmother, Miranda, who had worked for many years in the outpatient clinic as a nurse and was well versed in medicine. When the paramedic was absent from the medical station, she advised her fellow villagers on what to take for this or that ailment. Miranda was also well versed in herbal medicine, so her simple recipes usually had the expected effect. The rumor of the woman's clandestine practice reached the paramedic. The paramedic was very indignant and yelled at the woman in front of visitors. "Miranda, I will not have you practicing medicine in my institution. I am obligated to report this egregious incident." But the woman was not intimidated by the medic's threats. "Don't scare me. I could file a complaint against you too. You don't show up for work for days, and people come for help. You should be thanking me that I covered for you." After such disobedience on the part of the nurse, the paramedic decided to find a replacement, but no one would accept such a vacancy. Even the locals refused. For that kind of salary, let him crush his own floors. The confrontation ended with the fact that the paramedic came to house and began to beg her former subordinate, "Miranda, I'm sorry if I offended you unintentionally. Come back to the outpatient clinic, or I'm as handless without you." The woman didn't agree right away. She decided to torture the offender a little. Miranda had to intervene. He yelled at his wife, "Why are you putting a price on yourself? If you want to leave a man, go to work." "He can't. I don't like a lot of things about the office either. But I put up with it because I know there is no one to replace me." Herbert worked in the accounting department for over 40 years. There were only 2 entries in his employment history: hired and retired. Lucy was proud of her elderly relatives and insisted that they attend her wedding. The bride's parents also made their mark at the celebration, but left the day after the wedding. And the old people stayed at the House of Beauty for a whole week. They immediately found a common language with Herbert, who every day arranged for them excursions to Washington. Franklin's father praised his daughter-in-law Lucy, a real miracle. "With her appearance in our apartment became brighter, and I will try to provide her with a job at our institute." Herbert was pleased with the praise of a noble relative, and he added that in our village all women are like that, and they don't burn in fire and don't drown in water. The professor promised, "As soon as I have free time, I will come to visit you." And so it was settled. Lucy was in the clouds, not noticing anything around her, but then her grandfather's voice revealed many flaws. Before leaving home, the old man called his granddaughter aside. "Lucy, here you are, Franklin Soule from the wormhole." The girl laughed. "Grandpa, it's just that you're used to measuring everything by country standards. It's different in the big city. The old man objected. People are the same everywhere. I can spot a rotten one a mile away. Your Franklin ain't what he wants to be. You be on your guard with him." To appease your grandfather, Lucy promised to watch both of them. Of course, she soon forgot about that promise. She didn't think about her grandfather's fears either, because life in the capital had taken her on a whirlwind of its own. She and Franklin devoted themselves entirely to their common cause. Or rather, Lucy fed day and night over documents and new projects, and her husband pushed her. "Lucy, but try to finish this quickly. We don't have time. You realize there's so much money invested in this case. God forbid we fail. We'll be left with nothing." The young woman accepted the fact that she had to do all the rough work, and Franklin took on the search for partners and the legal part. Even during her pregnancy, Lucy worked at the same intense pace. She often complained to her husband, "Franklin, I can't take it much longer. Sometimes I feel like I'm going to fall down and never get up." The man would reassure his wife, "Lucy, you're strong." Your grandfather bragged to my father. I know Grandpa likes to show off himself and tell tales about his village too. Franklin, but even a strong woman needs rest, especially when she's in a position. After all, the constant tension can have a bad effect on our child. It was only after this powerful argument that Franklin made a small indulgence for his wife. But working to the point of exhaustion had done its evil work. The labor started early and was very difficult. After the birth of her daughter, Lucy turned her full attention to the child, which caused not only resentment, but also anger of her husband. Once Lucy did not hold back and also told Franklin everything she thought about him. "You treat me like a slave. You're just using me, without thinking about my health. I get the impression you don't even care about your daughter." The man was furious. "You should just keep your mouth shut and pray. Such fabulous luck doesn't come to everyone. Living the good life in downtown Washington, D.C., driving a fancy car. You dress in all the latest fashions, and you're not happy. So you're saying I should be jumping around and happy I'm in your service? It turns out that I have earned nothing and am worthless." Franklin laughed, "And in your face. Go to the mirror and look at yourself with your body weight. Maybe you can pull it off. $25. Lucy slapped her husband with a ringing slap. They didn't speak for a week, but Franklin gave in first. "Stop sulking. You pissed me off. I sass you about your fullness, too." I said it without exaggeration. "It's time you started working on your figure." But nothing was working for him. And she did not have time to attend a fitness club because everything was taken away by work. The company Beauty by Franklin expanded every year and profits increased. They had to look for new employees. Frank personally handled the search for staff. Therefore, Lucy was not aware of the latest changes. But one day she urgently needed financial documents, and together with her daughter, she went to the main office. What was her surprise when she saw a strange girl at her workplace? At home, she interrogated her husband. "Franklin, why is that pretty girl sitting at my computer?" The husband refused at first, but then he said, "To begin with, all office equipment is company property. As for your second comment, I can say that as the head of the company, I have the right to select staff without consulting my wife, EU. And you correctly pointed out that Maria is the name of this girl. It's very pretty. Perhaps I don't need to explain to you that clients and our partners evaluate the company by the appearance of employees, and Maria fully meet the most stringent requirements. They deserve to be the face of our firm." The young woman even took a breath from indignation. "So I'm ruining the image." "Exactly. And I've been asking you to take care of your body for a long time." That sounded insulting to the young woman. She started dieting again. She even went to see a nutritionist, but he told her not to torture yourself in vain because you'll never be model standard. You've been born broad-boned, but your weight is almost normal. So it creates a fullness effect that doesn't really exist. She returned home in high spirits. But Franklin wouldn't even listen to her. "You're just stupidly looking for an excuse for your weakness. But I don't insist. You like walking the cart. You're welcome." Soon Lucy learned that Franklin was dating Maria. "No, Cindy. They're very kind. Will Grandma cure your cough? She knows a lot of herbs. She won't give me an injection, I'm afraid." "No, my dear. We'll try to do without radical means of treatment." The girl such an explanation satisfied, and soon she already sweetly advised on the lap of her mother. At night, the traveler boarded the train, which was going through the territory. Herbert went out to get firewood when an unexpected guest showed up at the wicket gate. The unexpected illnesses fell out of the old man's hands. "Lucy, Lord, what are you standing there for? We have tea guests. But grandmother was already standing on the porch and crying from the sudden joy. She kissed first her granddaughter, then little Cindy, and said incessantly how good it was that we had waited for this day. Now we can die now that the welcoming traditions have been honored. Miranda tearfully confessed to her granddaughter that her grandfather and I had bad dreams about you all week. Tell us, what misfortune has befallen you? But Lucy is so tired from the road and worries that belittling asked Grandma, I'll tell you everything for sure. Only first Cindy and I must rest. In the evening, a family council met at the Hurd's house. Lucy's parents also showed up in a couple by themselves. Upon learning of the arrival of her daughter and granddaughter, the young woman cried, and reliving again the recent events, she told her relatives in detail about how her husband had kicked her out. Herbert listened to her granddaughter with his eyes downcast, but his cheekbones were jaundiced, giving away his anger. Barely had Lucy fallen silent. The old man growled and spewed. Tomorrow I'm going to go to fucking Washington, D.C., and I'm going to show that asshole where he belongs. Miranda started wailing again. I don't want you to go to jail in your old age. Stay home, hero. The girl's father supported her mother. Yes, father, it's better not to get involved with this scumbag. Believe me, he'll get a boomerang. That kind of thing doesn't go to waste, especially for a man. Although Franklin can only be called a man with a stretch, especially after doing something like that. Herbert said I told you he was rotten. I've never been wrong about people. The old man praised his abilities as a seer for a while. And then he said firmly, You, Lucy, do not worry. T is not alone, and we will always help you. Have a rest. Gather your thoughts. Think of something to do. Andrew suggested a daughter. I think that the best option is to look for a job in the district center. After all, you can get a job at school. You will be biology or botany to teach, and more useful fun will be among the kids because she will soon go to school. Lucy looked at her family. Thank you for your support, but can I decide my own fate? Herbert grinned. Our breed, bunnies. I don't like to be decided for me either. Of course, granddaughter, you know best. How is a little one better for you? Just 2 days later, Lucy surprised her family. I thought it over and came to the conclusion that I will stay here in the village. Andrew asked with surprise, and what will you do business here? The relatives looked at each other. Grandfather even chuckled from the excess of impressions. We already have one businessman, a retired colonel. He raises bees, so he got everyone. Have you also decided to organize honey production? No, Grandpa. I've chosen a different kind of business. I'm going to grow flowers, have leased a plot of land, and will plant lavender chamomile hut. Herbert said disappointedly. That's the number of vodka he drank and died the next morning. I thought you had something serious in mind. Did you get rich on such a thing? The young woman's face was transformed. She excitedly began to talk about the amazing plant, which she had a special fondness for. Even during my studies, I studied this business direction well. In Europe, it is highly popular. We also have positive examples. Andrew confusedly waved his hands, Lucy. But I don't believe in such fairy tales that you can make capital by growing flowers, and you shouldn't believe it. Lavender is not a demanding crop, and it feels very comfortable on our soils. With the right technique, you can achieve a profitability of 200%. Andrew was not impressed by these statistics, and he stubbornly said, I don't believe it. Herbert shouted at his son, What have you got? I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Let the girl try. Maybe she'll do something good. Besides, there's a lot of land here that we don't own. The authorities will be glad to have someone to take care of their culture. But Andrew didn't give up. But you need seed money to start a business. And as far as I'm concerned, Franklin's got you penniless. Miranda mumbles it's a good thing he let us out alive. Yeah, he gave me my stuff. And we'll help with the money with Grandpa. We have some savings for a rainy day. Lucy decided to start her own business with a small plot of land. Only the question of marketing the aromatic products remained unsolved. But her childhood friend Alex helped her. Fate brought them together in childhood, when their parents took them to the village on vacation. Although Alex was older than Lucy by 4 years, the age difference did not interfere with their friendship. In the years of youth, the guy helped the girl out many times, and she always tried to look up to him. It was Alex who infected her with the idea of entering the agricultural academy. He himself also graduated from this educational institution with a red diploma and almost immediately settled firmly in the capital. Lucy kept in touch with her friend and knew that he held a high position in the ministry. After a short hesitation, she decided to remind her old friend about herself. Alex was glad to receive Lucy's call. "How great that you called. At the first opportunity I rushed over, so wait, don't move anywhere." Alex showed up in a parade literally on the 3rd day after the call. "Lucy, you have no idea how excited I am. Tell me about your life in the capital. I hear you're married to a serious woman." Bitterly smirked, turned around and curled up. "I have no husband, no company. All my efforts have failed. You know, Alex, it hurts so much to realize that the person you trusted infinitely just used you." Lucy spoke briefly about her failed family life and noticed that he was looking at her strangely. A hunch struck the woman. "Alex, do you have problems in your family too?" The man looked away. "Sort of, but I try not to dwell on it. Especially now, I don't want to spoil the mood. Better tell me, what are you going to do next?" After hearing about her friend's plans, the man began to actively support her. "Lucy, you are thinking right and have chosen what is now very necessary for enterprising people. We have the best time in our country nowadays, and it is possible to take a loan for business development. And with the marketing of products, we will definitely think of something. Can you trust me to solve this issue?" A week later, Alex called and said that there is an opportunity to conclude an agreement with a well-known cosmetics company. The firm is very dear to its reputation, so cooperation with it will open the green light for you. But you must understand that you will have to undergo a number of laboratory tests. Lucy was ready for any tests. She was happy that things were moving in a positive direction. But suddenly there was another beneficiary, retired Colonel Beekeeper. When the plantation's lavender bloomed. The next year, Benjamin set up his hives nearby, and he didn't even warn the owner of the plot about it. Benjamin became the culprit of the first troubles of the novice flower farmer. That summer morning, Lucy did not know what awaited her on the plot, which she cared for as a living being. Together with her daughter, she went to the plantation early in the morning to assess the blooming activity. She and Cindy had no sooner reached their destination than they were attacked by bees already stiffening their brains and bodies. It was only her daughter's screams that made the woman take the right action as calmly as possible. She said to the girls, "Cindy, don't scream without waving your arms around. The bees don't like that. Mommy, but they buzz so scary. I got stung by one bee already. Look at the hole in my arm. I also managed to get stung, but it is better to endure." A few minutes mother and daughter stood, taking hands. Lucy half-whispered said, "Comrade Colonel, I would put your bees in one place, so that they would not be allowed to place their hives anywhere." As soon as the bees were gone, angry at the infiltration, the farmer went to see the colonel. Benjamin was delighted by the young woman's visit. "Lucy, you've made me very happy. You won't believe it, but I was just thinking of you," the woman remarked with undisguised sneer. "What a coincidence, huh? After all, I was thinking about you too, and even mentioned you in an unkind word." The colonel raised his thick eyebrows. "Why so? What have I done to you?" "Benjamin, I am not a girl to be spoken to like that. You're the one who can mess with my Cindy's head. Who gave you permission to put your beehives on my land? Couldn't you at least give me a little warning? You hid them in the bushes and your aggressive bees stung me and my daughter." The child could have had a reaction to the stings. The woman was telling the man off, and he was smiling cheekily. "Lucy, I'm so sorry you were hurt. You're overreacting about the land. You're just a temporary tenant, not the owner. Therefore, your claim is baseless. You are mistaken, Mr. Benjamin. and I demand that you remove the beehives immediately. Put them in your yard, and don't forget to open the windows. The colonel has backed down. Lucy, maybe we can make a deal. I'll compensate you for moral damage. Wait a second. The man disappeared in the doorway, but immediately returned and handed the woman a chocolate bar. Lucy was stunned by this insolence. Eat your own chocolate and put away your bee boxes today. Otherwise, I'm poisoning them. Benjamin snapped, because bees were the most important thing to him. Lucy, don't forget. I could report you to the police. I'll report you. I'll see my lawyer tomorrow. But I won't let you do anything illegal. Lucy was only determined until the evening. The next morning, she was laughing about yesterday's incident, but Benjamin set the wheels in motion, and soon his son showed up in the village. The woman was on a plot of land when he drove his car onto the plot. She rushed at him, screaming, "What are you doing? You're going to ruin all my flowers." The man was of impressive size, and even Lucy, with her lush physique, looked like a pathetic chicken against him. He started right away with threats. "Listen, you're a florist, and once again, Bake complains to me about lawlessness. You will have a pale look and macaroni gait. My apiary will be here." He turned around and walked at a leisurely pace to his car. Lucy was in some kind of eclipse. She took a few steps ahead on the X. "No. You listen to me, you scumbag. If I see hives on my property, congratulate all the bees and warn your daddy that if he doesn't stop the mayhem, he'll have to deal with my grandfather." The reference to my grandfather had a much greater effect than the threat to kill the bees, but the hives did not appear on the plantation again that summer. Lucy, but the rumor flew around the village that the farmer had promised to get rid of the colonel. Lucy found this out by accident when she went to the store to do some shopping. At her appearance in the village store, all at once quieted down. Even the word "Hunt Wendy" pulled her eyes out. Only Grandma Helen timidly asked, "Do you really have a gun?" Lucy stared at the elderly woman, then looked around with a surprised look at everyone present. "Dear countrymen, I rarely take it with me. More often, I use another object my grandfather has left from the war. He hides it in the attic." It was a shock for the wounded inhabitants of the small village. But the young farmer's dashing joke turned into another trouble. The next day, the neighborhood police came to their house in the early morning, when it turned out that the cause of the whole mess was Lucy's bad joke. The old people and the precinct officers laughed for a long time. But this story for several years walked around the neighborhood lady, not from the soul of the locals. There was another side effect that hurt Lucy's business more than anything else. It did not show itself in its full force in the first year, but later, when the farmer expanded her holdings, she found bald spots in her flower meadow on a daily basis. The local freeloaders usually raided at night. The woman tried to fight this lawlessness, but she could not catch the scoundrels in the act. Alex's daughter suggested a way out of her predicament. At that time, Irina was already 10 years old, and she studied in the elite Capital Gymnasium. The girl often came to them to play with Cindy. When she found out about the problem that Lucy couldn't solve, she advised her to put traps on the plot. The farmer didn't understand. "Betty, what traps are you talking about?" The girl squints her eyes slyly. "These are such devices to scare. They are different. There are those that fountains hit the face. There are sound. For example, a man came to a secret place, and he voiced from under the floor. She says, 'Put in place my candy.' You can put a horror movie in the trap." Repel means with a sound signal farmer. Purchased in the capital, when she went to the presentation of a new line of cosmetics based on Slavic oil. Returning home, the woman installed on the site repellent means of secret. Raiders managed to identify immediately on the first night. Or rather, he himself showed up at the farmer's house to express his indignation to her. Lucy was very surprised to learn that for almost 3 years her possessions had been emptied by the village headman. Well, the elderly plunderer of other people's goods was not embarrassed by the fact that he was engaged in illegal activities. Stephen began to express his indignation to Lucy in raised tones. "I was almost killed by Kondratius. Lucy, how can you scare decent people like that? Decent people Stephen does not climb in other people's gardens. To engage in such an unworthy business at your venerable age is very shameful. The headman said with resentment, "Do you feel sorry for the flowers? Why are they wasting away? I thought it wouldn't cost you anything if I picked some for myself." It turned out that the other villagers also had a craving for other people's goods. That's why Farmer She's plantation was constantly being raided. In order to somehow solve this problem, Lucy offered fellow villagers to buy their favorite flowers from her. She even offered a very reasonable price, but this option did not suit anyone. The headman regretfully said when for free is another matter, and to spend money on nonsense is not enough money. To get rid of Lucy's plunderers, they had to hire a watchman. After the next expansion of the plantation, she also hired 2 women who helped her to collect and dry raw materials. Each year the profits grew, and the U.S. farmer got her own car. She made major renovations to her grandfather's chorus, and even ran water and sewer to the house. The old people rejoiced. "Thank you, granddaughter, at least before she died. We will live in comfort." Lucy laughingly replied, "You're too early to die. It's time to enjoy life." Grandma was the first to die. Miranda wasn't sick or complaining about her health. She just went to sleep and never woke up. Herbert outlived his spouse by only 2 months. He had a stroke while chopping wood in the yard. The whole village buried the old man. Even the deputy of the village council showed up to say kind words about the man who had served his land faithfully. Alex, as usual, showed up without a warning call. Lucy was always happy to see her old friend and therefore immediately invited the guest to the kitchen. "Did you have dinner?" Orrin interrupted. The man sighed. "From you women cannot hide anything. You see everything. It's a pity that not everyone is as attentive and caring as you are. I'm not used to complaining, but lately I've been using the catering services more often." Lucy sat down at the table, leaning on her arms, and I thought life didn't roll on a roller for ministry employees. Pardon the tautology. No, you're right. And an ice skating rink is the most appropriate way to define my crisis. All right, you go. You can tell me all about it later. You'll be the first. Alex said, "What's your first course?" "Soup. And for the second, potatoes with sausages." 2 hungry fires lit up in the man's eyes. "Let's have both." "Lucy, you have no idea how much I missed simple home-cooked food." It was evident by the appetite with which Alex emptied the plates. "Lucy, did you just save me from starvation?" "No, of course not. I could have dined at my old folks' place, but it's unlikely I would have reached them alive. It's good to have a loyal friend who is willing to share a crust of bread." The woman was still looking at him carefully. "Alex, you've got a lot on your heart. I can see it in your eyes. You and observant. However, you've always been like that. If you want to tell me, it'll make me feel better. Basically, I came to see you on a completely different matter. But to make a long story short, I'm really in a lot of trouble in my family. You could even say it's a disaster. Although, on the other hand, it's a common thing. My wife left me, found someone else." Did the man lock his hands together to cope with the excitement? "No, I didn't say that right. We had a bad life from the start." Vanessa said I didn't live up to her expectations. Lucy was stunned. "Oh my God. I didn't think ministerial officials would have problems like that. Ministers are human beings too. They marry and divorce like ordinary citizens. My wife and I have been divorced for 5 years, after I caught her with a very cool dude. But we decided to keep it quiet. Slowly, we moved out to different apartments. My daughter stayed with me, and my wife didn't mind this division of responsibilities. But now she's suddenly awakened a maternal feeling, and she wants to take Betty away through the court. But if I'm not mistaken, your girls are 13. They'll be 14 soon. She doesn't want to move in with her mother because there's another uncle living there. And honestly, I mean, hand on heart, we are so used to living together. No one drops on your brain. No one demands anything. Alex, I think you're worried for nothing. If the girl wants to stay with her father, No one can force her to live with her mother. That's right. But trying to prove anything to my wife is useless. She's stubborn. In your face. Anyway, Betty and I are getting on her nerves, stalking us. Even tried to force my daughter away. So I brought her here. The man looked her in the eye with a pleading look. Lucy, would you do me the old-fashioned favor of watching my kid? I won't be in debt. Alex, don't be silly. Sure, I'll help you and the girls will have more fun together. Only with school. What to do? I take my star to the neighborhood every day. We don't have any elite high schools here. I don't know. Believe me, we don't need to show off right now. We need to get through this crisis. Vanessa and her husband are going to Germany for permanent residence, and she's persuading her daughter. And I already imagine in advance what it will be like in a foreign country, Alex. I said I agree. You don't have to persuade me. Alex left, and the next day Betty moved in with them. Lucy thought that the girl would live with her relatives, but the girlfriends decided to unite under one roof. Cindy took her mother aside with a conspiratorial look. Mom, aren't you angry that we're being uninvited? The woman sighed. Would it make a difference? The daughter started hanging around her mother. Mom and Betty will help you, honestly. We've already decided we're going to take over the cleaning, and Betty can cook. If you let us, we can pick flowers and dry them. Lucy jokingly swung a towel at her daughter. Get out of here, you little bitch. But to her surprise, Lucy soon came to the conclusion that Irina's presence has a positive effect on her daughter. In the relationship of the girls appeared even competitive moment. They grabbed with excitement for any work, and each tried to outdo the rival. More and more often the woman began to think that it would be nice to have two daughters, but she has long forbidden herself to dream of personal female happiness. And when Alex visited them, the woman behaved deliberately strict. Cindy once spoke out about it. Mom, you're funny to look at. You're trying to be such a snow queen, but you're not very good at it. If I were you, I'd take care of Dad, and you'd be fine, and Betty, and I would move to the capital. Mother was indignant. You've already planned everything without my consent, and I don't want to go anywhere. You can leave your mom's plantation to someone else. That's what real businessmen do. And why don't you want, for example, to become the owner of a cosmetic salon or something else worth picking up? Lucy only shrugged her shoulders because she was not ready to answer her daughter's question. Spring came, and the farmer eagerly started her favorite job. She got the seeds of an elite variety of lavender through a former classmate and decided to plant a few more varieties of flowering plants to try out. In the midst of the work, Cindy came running into the plantation. Mom, throw everything. Uncle Alex is here. He needs you right away. The woman always rode her bicycle to the field. She quickly jumped on the two-wheeler and headed for the village. Alex impatiently paced around the yard. Seeing Lucy, he was overjoyed. You have no idea what news I brought you, Alex. Only bearing in mind that I can't take all the news adequately. So it's better to be careful and from afar. All right. Have it your way. You told me you had experience working for a big company. Yeah. My husband has a cosmetics company in Washington. Now you have a unique chance to become a sole proprietor of a similar enterprise. I'm told there's a bidding war in a couple days, and one of the bankrupt firms is going under the hammer. I think you should be interested. It's about time you went beyond your plantation, Lucy. Every endeavor needs to evolve. You're stuck on one rung. Lucy spent the whole night tossing and turning. She had long dreamed of owning something big and promising, but she was afraid. And now it was such a fortunate coincidence. Without waiting until morning, she dialed Alex's number. Alex, I'm sorry to bother you in the middle of the night. I want to thank you and tell you that I'm ready to give it a try, but I'm kind of scared to go to DC alone. Maybe you're afraid you're gonna eat me. Lucy, I can't make any promises off the top of my head. You realize I'm a government man, but I'll try to honor my request. Expect a final answer tomorrow. Lucy was somehow sure that Alex would throw away one free day, and she was not mistaken. The next day, the buddy himself called. "Get ready. Tomorrow at 6 p.m., I'll pick you up in my car. It's quicker and safer." All the way they chatted about meaningless trivia, and only by the end of the road, Lucy asked Alex, "Do you happen to know the name of the firm that is going under the hammer?" "You know, I haven't memorized it. There will be several bids at the auction, so I didn't really focus on the name. But something to do with beauty. Well, that's understandable. After all, cosmetics are used by women to enchant us men with their beauty." This answer satisfied the woman, and she asked no more such questions. People with half-covered eyelids watched Alex. Now he did not resemble any employee of the ministry at all. He was dressed in jeans, a light-colored t-shirt. Yeah, it's expensive, you can tell, but who would be surprised by expensive clothes nowadays? Lucy grinned to herself. If the villagers found out how much money she had and how much she was going to pay for an unknown company, half of them would have had a heart attack, and the other half would have rushed to tear out the plantings in the vegetable garden to take up flowers. Lucy could not take her eyes off Alex's hands. He was turning the steering wheel. The cards and the muscles under his t-shirt were moving. She even got angry. She missed the male type. What more could she ask for? No more men in her life. They're nothing but trouble. Alex, of course, is not like that. So let him remain so good, caring, but just a friend. He suddenly turned to her. "Lucy, what are you mumbling about?" Lucy caught herself and was immediately confused. "Who am I?" Did he laugh? "No, unlike you know. When I was following you today, for some reason I remembered how you got your village all rattled, remember? And I had to lie that you were at home with me, and we were reading books." Lucy laughed. "Oh, come on. You haven't remembered for so many years that I'd almost forgotten. And here you are." It was so long ago, and it was such a long time ago, that Lucy had almost forgotten it. It was because of the same grandmother, Helen, with whom she still had clashes. Helen had always had a very nasty temper, and her then cat Jack had the same temper. This Jack held all the village cats in fear and attacked people as well as a chain dog. Once when Lucy's cat, or rather grandparents, came again in battle wounds, Lucy got angry. "But Gad, I'll arrange for you to be the kindest to love everyone. And most importantly, 24 hours to Grandmother Helen's songs to sing." Even then, Lucy was terribly fond of studying the properties of herbs. Of course, though Alex was older, but could not support her. They both didn't think it would have such an effect. For 2 days, Lucy prepared the potion. Alex only asked her if it would send the cat to the other side of the world. "No, don't even worry. I didn't do him any harm. How can I explain it to you? It's like moonshine for our men always want always a little, and then fun. And then it's no more fun. As soon as it got dark, and it got dark close to midnight in the summer, the nights are short. Lucy and Alex quietly moved to the case. Alex guarded, and Lucy generously anointed outside the gate dough made by her liquid, and they immediately went home. In the morning, Lucy was awakened for the proper screams. She jumped out of bed and nestled against the window. The girl's eyes became huge at the gate. Helen, in one big circle, walked and shouted. That is, to put it in their language, cats and cats sang. The sight was strange, and from that very terrible. About 40 cats walking in one trajectory and singing. And the cats were singing, so it gave me goosebumps. There's a crowd of villagers standing nearby. People look at this picture with horror and quietly discuss when to wait for the end of the world. Every now and then one of the owners rushes out, grabbing her cat to carry it home. But the cat becomes real at that moment. Fury lashes out and rushes to the gate again. Helen's grandmother went sick because she was sure someone had put a curse on her. And Miranda probably did it, because she can. But Grandpa came up to people in the afternoon and Alex, Lucy, confess what you did. Lucy was ready to confess everything. But Alex said, no, Grandma Miranda, we sat up late at night at the books. And then Lucy went to bed. You saw that. It was the one and only time Lucy had ever fooled Grandma. The courtroom where the estate was being adjudicated was not crowded. Lucy and her companion wanted to take the empty seats, and at that moment someone called out to her, "Lucy, what are you doing here?" She turned around and turned pale. In front of her stood her ex-husband, but in this man there was nothing left of the self-righteous and arrogant egoist who almost broke her life. Alex watched the meeting of former spouses and did not know how to get out of his ticklish position. To relieve the tension, he reminded that it was time to take their seats, but Franklin couldn't budge. "Lucy, you can rejoice, and I am a total bust. There will be a historic event in this room today. My firm, to which I have devoted half my life, will be sold for next to nothing." The man spoke with desperation and loudly attracting the attention of those present. Lucy felt out of place. More than anything, she wanted to run away from this place. But Alex held her hand. "You want me to show sympathy now? You know, I don't have any." "You don't. Of course you do. You would have wanted a piece of it, too, and you didn't get it." Lucy suddenly realized how pathetic Franklin looked, like he wanted to get as much sleep as possible. "Franklin, everything I need in life, I have." He looked at her with interest and only now noticed that his ex-wife looked pretty good. He could tell the difference between cheap clothes and good expensive ones, and the hair was styled to cut his wife's hair. Did they open a barber shop in that remote village? Franklin shifted his gaze to her companion. There was something familiar about him. I'd seen him somewhere before, but Franklin wasn't interested in him now. "So you're saying you're having a great life," but Lucy picked up on it. "But how is that possible when you threw me out on the street?" "Is that what you were going to ask?" Franklin staggered back. He hadn't expected Lucy to say it so laudably and directly. But why would she? It was just the way things were. Franklin suddenly thought that, if he put his hand on his heart, Lucy's merit in their venture was, of course, enormous. The next thought made him remember. Lucy had loved him so much, and what if he were to make a quick castling change from Maria to Lucy? She'd pull like a real horse. She'd be able to think of something anyway. These thoughts so took possession of Franklin that he even missed the moment when he was demanded into the hall. He went to his seat and suddenly saw Maria in the hall and frowned. What had she come here for? And almost immediately heard that Maria had filed for divorce, and since she had worked for this company for many years, she was demanding financial compensation as a wife. So the wording was something like this: she worked for the good, and Franklin ruined everything by his unfortunate actions, and she and her son suffered. That seems like a lot of nonsense, except that for Franklin the nonsense was being discussed in all seriousness. He tried to spin his wife with a look, but she wouldn't even look at him. It turns out that if he got something out of the sale of the company, if he got anything out of the debts, it was from Maria. Franklin shifted his gaze to Lucy. That was it. Didn't have time to ask what she was doing here. Starting to complain about her failures, of course. And she's probably filing for some kind of compensation. After all, she did have a daughter with him. That's despicable, but he'll fight for every penny. The woman in the suit read out his debts at length. Franklin frowns angrily. He noticed that Lucy was taking notes and discussing something with a companion. He wonders why she's here, why she's rewriting his debts. There are two solutions to the problem. Firms completely disband all equipment, raw materials, and finished products are sold, and the proceeds go to pay off debts, or the firm is sold in its entirety, with the obligation to pay off all debts. Franklin was sure that the first option would be accepted. Then there would be enough not only for the debts, but also a little left for himself. By the way, it was Lucy who once insisted on buying high-quality, expensive equipment. She said that only such equipment could produce quality products. Even now, this equipment cost a lot of money. When Lucy raised her hand, Franklin looked at her with interest. Now everything would become clear. What he heard gave him a real shock. She is going to buy his firm, and with full repayment of debts at once. No, that can't be true. It's crazy. Where would she get that kind of money? He even stood up out of worry. He saw the way Maria was looking at him. Yeah, to hell with Marta. After the meeting, Franklin caught up with Lucy. I see you're settling in quite nicely. He cast a quick glance at Alex. Is there anyone who even keeps cows? Alex turned around in a second and smashed his fist into Franklin's nose. Then he took Lucy under his arm, and they went out to Franklin. Maria came up. You saw it. You saw it. Will you testify in court? Yes, of course I will. I saw you clinging to the chair. Maria left. Didn't even help him up. Franklin got up on his own and hurried away under the stares of those present. Cindy opened the gate and froze. Oh, when did you get back? And what is it that we smell so good? Alex's head appeared behind her. If I'm not mistaken, it's Dad's signature barbecue, and it is made on exceptional occasions. Alex laughed. You are like two purebred sheepdogs. You picked up the trail and followed the smell. The girls entered the courtyard. The table was almost set in the gazebo. They did not understand anything at all. From the house looked out Lucy at the broth and came. Come to my aid. The girls went into the house, not understanding anything. Ma, why don't you tell me what the big deal is? Betty slapped herself on the forehead. I think I know. Cindy looked at her suspiciously. Spit it out. Look, but it adds up. They went to town, then came back and set the table. They must have applied. Cindy shifted her suspicious gaze to her mother. Madam, we guessed right. Lucy blushed. Well, of course not. What kind of nonsense is going through your head? Take your plates and go outside. The girls ran off laughing, and Lucy took a breath. What had gotten her so worked up? Their assumption. That's ridiculous. She and Alex are good friends. And that's it. Guys, enough talking. Everybody get to the table. Meat can't wait to be eaten hot. Everybody laughingly sat down in the gazebo, and Lucy raised her glass. What can I say now? I mean, it's gonna be short. And then, if you, Cindy, want to hear the details, I'll answer all your questions. Today I bought the firm I once founded. But then Franklin, my ex-husband, decided he should own it. The firm is in terrible shape. It's broke, but it has a brand, which is now shaken. There's equipment, production. I want to raise a glass to the fact that it will prosper again soon. Cindy and Betty, who had been listening with their mouths open to what Lucy was saying, drank their juice machiniatically, and Cindy finally exhaled. The truth about what? The truth, daughter. But it's also true that we're going to have to travel back and forth, and I honestly don't know how to deal with it yet. Cindy looked up at her mother. What's the name of the firm? It's a pretty good sounding name. Franklin Beauty. But I think we should rename it. We don't want someone else's laurels, even though they're not there anymore. Cindy was under some stress. She hardly spoke at all. And when the guests had left and she and her mother had put away all the dishes, her daughter sat down in front of her. Mom, it seems to me that you are now quite old enough to know everything that happened with you and your father. Lucy sighed, sat down across from her and said, I guess you're right. I'm going to tell you everything now. Just don't think I want to deliberately smear my father, whatever he was. He's your father. I always wanted you two to communicate. But alas and Franklin was up all night. He was thinking. His brain had always been an adventurous one, and now it was going to take a lot of twisting to get it right. In the evening, he made inquiries about his ex-wife and scolded himself for not having done it earlier. It turns out that while he thought that his wife was a milkmaid, so as not to starve to death, Lucy was doing very well. Not just not bad, you could say it was great. He didn't make a big deal about it, but he was told she had a lot of momentum. Now, of course, it's gonna be very hard to get out of it, because she'll think he's after her money. But there is one very good idea. It's Cindy's idea. He could melt a daughter's heart, that's for sure. And clearly the girl was missing him. And Lucy had never been the type to turn a child against him. So Cindy was the place to start. I wish I could remember how old she is. Better yet, find out what she's into. All right, then. Where the hell have we been? He'll think of something, won't he? As morning came, Franklin left the house. Cindy woke up and stretched sweetly. How good was that? They had such a talk with Mom yesterday. Cindy realized that Lucy really didn't mean to denigrate her father, but that's how her daddy turned out to be. Honestly, she wanted to look at him, to talk to him. I wondered if he felt anything for her as a daughter or not. Somehow Cindy felt like he didn't. But to be sure, to put a final end to this tale, she wanted to. Cindy, but are you asleep? Are you still awake? Betty's head came through the window. I'm asleep. What's wrong? No, come on. I'm going fishing with the bonefish today. You were dying to go. Cindy jumped out of bed, with Bones. How could she forget that? Yeah, Martin's the hottest guy in school. All the girls are chasing him. And he invited her to go fishing. All they had to do was figure out who he was more interested in, her or Betty. Cindy was determined if it was Betty, she'd step right into the shadows, out of the way of her friends. Betty decided the same. Although, to be honest, she didn't like Martin at all. He was too handsome, as if he wasn't real. And he invited her to go fishing as if he was doing a favor for a happy little girl. So Betty agreed. 10 minutes later, they were at the river. Damn, I forgot to leave my mom a note. Betty looked at Martin. We won't be long. He nodded in agreement. Surprisingly, Martin talked. He didn't sit there with a strange look, as he usually did at school. He turned out to be a very cheerful, simple guy. Betty and Cindy, they'd long since forgotten about fishing. They were laughing, holding their stomachs, and Martin was making up new stories. We were very interested. Martin looked at them with regret. Let's sit by the river in the evening. Polly smiled. Let's. Betty wanted to refuse, but Cindy gave her a look that said there was nothing left to do. How could I say yes? Cindy, the girls, and Martin turned around. There was a man standing not far from them, and looking at Cindy with a kind of pleading look. At me, she was a little confused. She'd never seen him before. And then her mind began to clear. You, Frank? No, wrong. I'm your daddy. Martin and Betty looked at Cindy in amazement, and she immediately calmed down. No, that's where you're wrong. Daddy's usually around children, and you're around me. I don't remember that. Franklin got a little off track and decided to get right to the main part. Cindy will definitely talk about everything. Your mom must have given you the wrong information. I just couldn't be around for reasons beyond my control. Look what I brought you. Franklin walked quickly to the car and pulled out a laptop computer. The money was a pity, of course, but he needed to impress Cindy. He realized perfectly well that a country girl, albeit a wealthy one, couldn't have such a thing. In fact, to be honest, he had expected to see a very rustic kitchen. But in front of him stood a quite fashionable, beautiful girl. Thank you very much. But I have a laptop much more powerful than this. Franklin shrieked with the teeth of a grave. You could have kept your mouth shut. Cindy was silent. Franklin was silent. Looks like this isn't going to be as easy as he thought. He finally got it out of his system. But how do you live, my daughter? Cindy sighed. I guess I'll have to go through this ordeal to the end. Okay, Martin and Betty nodded their heads in agreement for now. Of course, she would have to talk to her daddy, whom she hadn't seen in so many years. Franklin left the car by the river, and she and Cindy walked toward the houses. As luck would have it, they ran into Helen's grandmother. She stopped and gave them an attentive look. She thought for a long time what kind of a man she had already seen and finally remembered grandmother, and Helen picked up everything, rushed to the place where Lucy had Cindy, and she is there and knows nothing. Lucy pulled herself away from the papers. Now her head was busy with how to make everything enough for the customers and for her own firm. It would be very profitable. Seeing her grandmother, Helen wrinkled her nose and walked towards her. But what's wrong, Helen? You're here while you're in your herbs. Elkin's daddy's here, He's already taken her somewhere. Oh, lucky girl. And you wouldn't know it. Lucy's heart almost stopped. She knew very well how beautifully Franklin could sing his speeches. They could confuse anyone. You're not confused, Helen, are you? No, my memory's still good. Lucy didn't say another word. She jumped on her bike and rode off into the village. I came home like a fury, ready to tear Franklin apart right now. Cindy was lying on the bed reading a book. Lucy took a breath. Where's Daddy? I sent him home. For some reason, he thought we were very happy to have him back. Mom, what's wrong with you? Why are you so pale? Lucy waved her hand and suddenly cried. Cindy immediately jumped up and hugged her. What did you think? Did you think I'd take it? No, Mommy, you're the best. And remember, it wasn't just you he chased away, it was me too. Lucy was standing in the middle of the hall. Next to her was Cindy. Here's my daughter. I used to design everything here. Cindy looked at it with delight. When I learn, I'll come and work for you. Will you take me? Lucy laughed. Well, of course, the firm was empty now. All employees were sent on vacation for an unknown amount of time. Do you want me to give you a job now? Of course I do. What kind of job? We'll find all the employees' cell phones, and you'll call them, invite them to a meeting. Like tomorrow, 3:00 p.m. Cindy even clapped his hands. Oh, that's great. Like your real assistant. Exactly from behind, slapped like that. Lucy turned around sharply. Two people came through the door and stopped. It was Maria, her son Kevin. Hello. I was walking by. I see the door open. I realized you were here. Maria looked tired. Actually, she was. She'd been looking for work for 2 weeks without success. No one wanted to take in a wife, even an ex-wife. A man who'd screwed up his own big firm. Excuse me, Lucy, I know this is probably a silly thing to say, but would your firm have a job for me? You see, basically, it's just like you said it would be. Lucy, who a moment ago had been ready to throw the woman out, sighed. Oh, what fools we all are. Cindy walked over to him. Hi. He looked at her with clear eyes. Hi. So it turns out you're my brother. He nodded. It's working. Why are you standing there like you're not my own? Let's give each other a hug. At that moment, Lucy held back her tears with great difficulty. No matter how willful, she's real. And she has a heart too. 3 months have passed. Well, my dears, we have signed very large, lucrative contracts. Or rather, there are several, but the work will go in the same direction. We can be congratulated for the new year. In addition to the salary, I promise to give a good bonus. People in the hall murmured approvingly. Many people returned to work. All those who once knew Lucy without a second thought. Those who were younger after the interview with her were those who had already found another job. But those two were slowly pulling up. Maria sat next to her. They had once worked at the same place, and now Maria was helping her a lot. It had been so many years. The market has changed a lot. Today we can celebrate a real victory. The thaw, Lucy could safely say they'd gone up. Cindy was often at her work too, often staying up late with her, absorbing and studying everything her mother did. So today at the meeting, she sat in the front row. They went outside and got in the car. Shall we go home? Cindy nodded in agreement. A little over a month ago, she and her mother had bought a very successful apartment. Mom, have you talked to Uncle Alex for a long time? Yes, a long time. Why doesn't he call? But Lucy will not tell her that almost every night grabbed the phone to dial him, and then put it off, afraid that she would violate his privacy. If he doesn't call himself, there's no reason to. Mom, that's not right. You know how Uncle Alex feels about you, don't you? Lucy looked at her daughter with a smile. How did she grow up? How? Well, Mom, you understand. Oh yeah. Lucy smiled sadly. You see, Cindy, if he had been interested in me, he would have at least called. Now, Mom, you're not acting right. Why? It's very simple. You don't need his help right now. You're doing fine. So he pulled away to get out of the way. Lucy suddenly hit the brakes. You think so? I'm sure. You think about it. Think about something. Lucy now realized that Alex was always there for her. When she needed his help, he'd drop everything and rush to her. And now that she's doing great, she hasn't even called him. She should call him. Cindy held up her mom's hand, which reached for the phone. No, I have a better idea. It's Uncle Alex's birthday today. She told me. But he'll be back from work in 2 hours. Of course, he's not going to celebrate his birthday. Lucy smiled at Cindy, and in someone so smart, call Betty. You and I are going to the mall. Cindy laughed. Now I recognize you. Otherwise nothing makes you happy. Lucy smiled lately. It was true. Even the successes of the firm did not make her as happy as the upcoming meetings with Alex. Alex had parked the car. She should have at least bought a cake. Betty had obviously prepared some kind of gift. He looked at his watch, and it was a few blocks to the nearest supermarket, which was still working. Okay, his daughter was grown up and wouldn't take offense. He closed the car and moved toward the house, opened the house. Strange, so quiet and no daughter to greet him. He walked into the big room and turned on the light. The air flew streamers from the clapper. Alex even sat down from fright. And then he saw Lucy. You, and she came over. Why did you keep it a secret? That it's your birthday. He smiled confusedly. I didn't think you'd be interested. Well, I was wrong. I'm interested in everything to do with you. He looked at her incredulously. You are? Of course I am. How are you? They stood in the middle of the gamut the girls had set up, and it was as if they hadn't heard or seen anything, neither the noise nor the foil glitter falling on them. Lucy thought she missed her terribly, and Alex wondered why he hadn't confessed his feelings to her sooner. Why had he waited until she was the owner of a successful business? The evening went well. Cindy stayed the night at Ira's, and Alex volunteered to escort Lucy. Yeah, I'll take a cab to get there just fine. I'm not arguing with you. I'll walk you all the way to the door. They rode in the cab holding hands like schoolchildren. We didn't say a word the whole way. When they got to her door and Lucy opened it, they didn't agree on anything. Together, they went inside. Franklin only got the back of the car into the gate the third time. How angry was he? How did he hate the whole world? He's Franklin, supposed to be delivering equipment and accessories for the holidays. But that's all right. He'll be patient for a while. And then he's bound to come up with something profitable. Yes, he had money left. Not much, but enough to live on for now to avoid such a humiliating job. But he relied on his intuition and decided to play the stock market. Now he had no money for anything at all. And if he didn't go to work, there would be trouble waiting for him. These two souls he could not find in any way on offensive words for ex-wives. They filed for alimony all at once. He got an astronomical amount of money, and it was very unpleasant. Neither one would talk to him. And then he found out that Maria worked for Lucy, and he just had to accept it. He stopped the car and opened the door. Who's unloading? Franklin. He turned around in surprise. Lucy was unrecognizable. She had lost a little weight. Plus, she was wearing a very well-tailored suit. All in all, she looked amazing. Have you decided to open a holiday introduction business too? She smiled confusedly. No, it's my holiday. And it's here to prepare properly for the wedding, for my wedding. No movers, by the way. It should be in your contract. She went to the man who was hurrying towards her along the path. Franklin immediately recognized the man who had accompanied her to the courthouse. Then came the realization of how he knew him. Sure enough, it was the man from the ministry. He had crossed paths with him a couple of times when he was still on the horse. Franklin kicked the door with all his might. What on earth was this? Why? Why? A single word boomeranged in his head. Pain shot through his leg, and he almost screamed, but there was nothing to do. He got the hell out of there and started unloading the car. Mom, can I invite Martin to your wedding? Lucy pretended to try to figure out who Martin was. Mom, you know him very well. You're serious with him. Cindy blushed. Mom, he's just my friend. Lucy smiled. It's nice to have a friend in your life, especially if he is a little bit like Uncle Alex.